The first thing Serafina Hale heard through her bedroom wall was her fiancé laughing at the word accident. The second thing she heard was Lady Corvina Marrow saying, "Snow hides foolish girls very well." Serafina stood in the middle of her chamber with a silver brush in one hand and a hunting boot in the other. The fire had burned low. The mirror showed a woman of 26 in a dark green house gown, hair half braided, face too still. At her feet, 8 royal winter hounds stopped chewing the same stolen slipper and lifted their heads together. Prince Orenvale spoke again on the other side of the carved panel. His voice had the lazy softness he used at council dinners. "She knows the forest paths. Make her trust the western stag trail. The ravine will do the rest." Corvina gave a small, delighted gasp. "You sound almost cruel." "Cruel would be breaking the betrothal in open court," Oren said. "This is cleaner. A tragic misdirection during the winter hunt. Her hounds will scatter. She will panic. By sunset, father will need a new bride for the border alliance." Serafina lowered the boot. Captain Biscuit, largest of the hounds, rose with the patience of a judge. Duchess followed. Buttons wagged once, then sneezed into the slipper. Oren added, "Besides, she is only the royal kennel master's pretty daughter. My father liked her mother's service record. That does not make her fit to sit beside me." The silver brush bent in Serafina's hand. For 3 breaths, she did nothing. That was important. Her mother had taught her not to loose a hound until the hound understood the shape of the field. So Serafina listened. She heard silk brush stone. She heard Oren lift a cup from the little table in the adjoining guest salon. She heard Corvina murmur that she had already moved the western trail markers. Then Serafina set the brush down and smiled at her hounds. "Good evening, respectable criminals," she whispered. "We're going to practice manners." Every tail began to move. She crossed the room, opened the hidden panel, and stepped into the guest salon with all 8 hounds at her skirts. Oren was standing too close to Corvina beside the wine table. His dark blue coat was unbuttoned at the throat. Corvina's white fur wrap sat over Serafina's own chair. They both turned at once. Serafina looked at the wine, the trail map, the shifted markers drawn in red ink, and the little knife Corvina had used to scrape wax from the royal hunt seals. "My lord," Serafina said, "my lady." Oren went pale. "Soha, this is not what it appears to be." "Excellent," she said, "because it appears to be a planned disappearance with poor handwriting." Corvina recovered faster. She smiled with her lips and not her eyes. "You should not enter rooms without knocking." Serafina lifted 2 fingers. Captain Biscuit put both front paws on Oren's chest and flattened him onto the carpet. Oren made a sound that would not have impressed a rabbit. Duchess seized the hem of his coat and dragged him 3 feet from the wine table. Buttons leapt on Corvina's fur wrap and shook it with such moral fury that white hair filled the air. Mutton, who had never respected royalty, placed one enormous paw on Oren's stomach and licked his chin. "Call them off," Oren shouted. "You wanted me lost in a ravine," Serafina said. "I want your collar buttons lost under a settee. We are not the same." Corvina shrieked when Pepper caught the sash of her gown and pulled it loose enough to tangle her ankles. No one was hurt. Only tailoring suffered. The hounds had been trained to catch sleeves, cloaks, straps, and pride. They did their work with frightening cheer. Serafina stepped over Oren's boot and took the trail map. She took the scraped seal knife. She took the little red pouch of false markers from Corvina's hand while the lady was busy trying to save her sleeve from foxglove. Oren tried to rise. Captain Biscuit lowered his head and breathed directly into the prince's face. "He has eaten boiled cabbage," Serafina warned. "Make choices with that knowledge." Oren froze. For one wild moment, laughter climbed Serafina's throat. It was sharp and bright and wrong. She let it out anyway. The sound startled Corvina more than the hounds had. Serafina backed toward the panel. "I will send someone for the furniture. You may want new furniture. Also new souls." "Sarah," Oren said, voice breaking. "You cannot do this. Watch me." She whistled once. 8 hounds released silk, wool, buttons, and dignity. They rushed after her through the panel. Serafina shut it, bolted it from her side, and ran. She laughed down the corridor until the laugh cracked. She laughed past the tapestry of the first winter hunt. She laughed down the servant's stair, while Buttons carried Corvina's fur wrap in his mouth like a fallen enemy banner. By the time she reached the kennels, The laugh had become a sob she could not swallow. The royal kennels were warm with straw, iron stoves, and dog breath. 32 hounds lifted their heads from their beds. The youngest pups tumbled over each other to reach her. The old lead bitch, Grandmother Pike, opened one eye and judged everyone. Serafina shut the kennel door behind her and pressed both hands to her mouth. Oren had planned the western ravine. Corvina had moved the markers. The prince had said only the kennel master's daughter. Only pretty, only useful until a cleaner bride appeared. Her knees weakened. Captain Biscuit leaned his weight against her thigh. Duchess pushed her head under Serafina's hand. Buttons dropped the fur wrap and sat on it, proud and unhelpful. Serafina allowed herself 12 breaths. On the 13th, she stood. Crying was permitted. Collapse was not. She crossed to the tack room and lit 2 lamps. The kennel ledgers waited in their cabinet. She pulled the winter feed book, the hunt route register, the injury log, and the sealed copy of the hound master's oath. Her mother had made 3 rules for a woman cornered by a noble house. First, leave with proof. Second, leave with witnesses. Third, leave loudly enough that silence becomes suspicious. Serafina took all 3 rules personally. She packed the ledgers in oilcloth. She strapped grain pouches to 6 sled harnesses. She opened the iron cage where the hunt whistles hung and took the black horn whistle that had belonged to her mother. Then she paused at the smallest hook. A child's whistle hung there on a frayed blue cord. It was plain bone, carved with a crooked moon. A boy had given it to her in a snowstorm when she was 8. He had found her crying under a pine before she ever came to the palace. He had wrapped his own scarf around her and said, very severely, that brave girls were still allowed to ask for help before freezing to death. She had never learned his name. Serafina put the old whistle around her neck. The hounds watched with bright eyes. "We are not sneaking away," she told them. "We are conducting a professional relocation." Grandmother Pike groaned. "Do not take that tone." 1 hour later, the eastern kennel gate opened on a site the palace would discuss for years. Serafina Hale walked out under a hard white moon wearing her training coat, tall boots, and a belt full of whistles. Behind her came 32 royal winter hounds in travel harness. 6 dragged sleds of ledgers, feed, medicines, blankets, and 1 stolen white fur wrap that Buttons refused to surrender. At the front, Captain Biscuit carried Oren's torn collar in his mouth. Serafina stopped at the public hunt board in the stable court. She pinned the red pouch of false trail markers beside the royal map. Under it she wrote, in the bold hand her mother had beaten into her, "The Western Trail was tampered with. Ask Prince Oren why." After a moment, she added, "Do not feed traitors to the hounds. It upsets the hounds." The stable boys read it twice. One of them whispered, "Mistress Hale, where are you going?" "To the border," Serafina said. "The hounds require fresher company." Captain Biscuit wagged. No one stopped her. By dawn, the palace bells were behind them. The city road lay buried under clean snow, and Serafina had cried enough to leave salt on her scarf. Her hounds moved around her in disciplined waves. Some ran ahead to read the wind. Some guarded the sleds. Buttons kept trying to wear Corvina's fur wrap and falling sideways into drifts. Serafina should have gone south to her mother's cousin. She should have sought a magistrate. She should have stayed in the palace and forced a hearing before Oren could prepare his lies. Instead, she had chosen the border road. The border was where grain shortages were whispered about in the palace kitchens. It was where soldiers wrote complaints that disappeared inside sealed offices. It was where her mother had once said truth traveled faster because hungry men had less patience for court perfume. It was also the road Oren would least expect a kennel woman to take with 32 hounds and several sleds of incriminating paper. At mid-morning, Grandmother Pike stopped beside a frozen ditch and growled. Serafina raised a fist. Every hound halted. The road ahead curved through black firs. Beyond the firs came the low iron sound of horses moving under armor. Not palace riders. The rhythm was heavier, colder, controlled by people who expected ambush and had survived many. Captain Biscuit moved in front of Serafina. "Easy," she said. The first rider appeared between the trees. He was tall even on a tall black horse. A charcoal cloak hung from shoulders built for war rather than court. His hair was black, wind-torn, and swept back from a face cut with hard lines. A scar crossed the edge of his jaw. His eyes were the pale steel gold of an alpha who had stopped asking rooms for permission years ago. Behind him rode 20 border soldiers, all lean, all cold, all watching the hounds with the same wary calculation. The lead rider reined in. Serafina looked up at him. He looked down at her sleds, her hounds, her red eyes, and the stolen fur wrap currently wrapped around Button's middle. "Is this a rebellion?" he asked, "or a kennel exercise with poor paperwork?" Serafina wiped her face with the back of one glove. "That depends who is asking." General Rurik Voss of the Frost March. She stiffened. Every servant in the palace knew that name. The border alpha general was called cold-blooded by people who had never spent a winter without firewood. He had broken raider sieges, dragged 3 corrupt quartermasters to judgment, and once refused to bow to Oren at a feast until the prince apologized to a wounded soldier. Rurik's gaze moved over the hounds again. "And you are?" "Serafina Hale, Royal Hound Trainer. Former fiancé of Prince Oren, unless he has developed courage during breakfast." One of the soldiers coughed. Rurik did not blink. "Former? He planned to lose me in a ravine during the winter hunt. I objected with dogs." The general's horse shifted. Rurik's gloved hand tightened on the reins. "Did you kill him?" he asked. "No." "Did the dogs?" "Also no. They mauled his tailoring." A second soldier turned his face away. Rurik leaned slightly forward. Snow dusted the black sweep of his hair. "You left the palace with every royal hound." "Not every hound," Serafina said. "I left 3 elderly spaniels. They are politically unreliable." For a moment his mouth changed. It was not a smile. It was the memory of one. Then a cartwheel cracked behind his line. A grain wagon lurched sideways in the road. 2 soldiers jumped down to steady it. One sack fell from the back, burst against a stone, and spilled pale kernels across the snow. Serafina smelled the problem before anyone spoke. The hounds smelled it too. Grandmother Pike lowered her nose. Captain Biscuit sneezed and looked offended. Rurik turned in the saddle. "Hold that sack." Serafina walked past him without asking. A border sergeant moved to block her, then stopped when 32 hounds politely considered removing him from the path. She crouched beside the torn sack. Wheat should smell dry, grassy, faintly sweet. This smelled of cellar mold, river silt, and something sharp that belonged in mortar. She pushed her fingers into the grain and rubbed. Grit scratched her glove. "Sand," she said. Rurik dismounted in one smooth motion. He landed close enough that she felt the impact through the frozen road. "How much?" Serafina lifted a handful. Grain and pale grit slid between her fingers. "Enough to cheat a scale. Enough to break teeth. Enough to starve a keep while the ledger says you were fed." The nearest soldiers went very still. Rurik crouched beside her. His shoulder nearly brushed hers. He smelled of cold leather, pine smoke, and iron discipline. Up close, his face looked younger than the stories and more tired than the scar allowed. "Can your hounds track where the sand entered the sacks?" he asked. Serafina glanced at the torn seal. The wax mark was royal blue, but the press had slipped. Her kennel ledgers tracked feed shipments by scent for the hunt dogs. Grain theft always left a trail if someone cared to put a nose to it. "Yes," she said, "if you stop breathing down my collar." His eyes lowered to the space between them. Serafina realized his gloved hand was braced on the snow beside hers. Their fingers were close enough for the heat of him to reach her through winter air. Her heart, treacherous animal, struck once against her ribs. Rurik did not move away. "I breathe where the evidence is," he said. "Then the evidence is about to file a complaint." A hound sneezed directly into the spilled grain. Serafina closed her eyes. "That is Mutton. He has strong views on fraud." Rurik looked at the hound, then back at Serafina. "Mistress Hale, I was writing to the capital to demand the grain owed to my garrisons. It appears the capital has sent me sand and a witness." "I am not capital property." "I did not say you were." His answer came too fast for courtesy. It landed between them with a weight she felt. Serafina stood. He stood with her. Because he was very tall and too close, she had to tilt her head back. Oren had used height as decoration. Rurik wore it like a wall built in a blizzard. "I can help you test the wagons," she said. "Then I keep moving." "Where?" "Away from ravines. The road ahead is borderland. Wolves answer to me there. Hounds answer to me everywhere." One of his eyebrows rose. Captain Biscuit chose that moment to sit on Rurik's boot. The general looked down. Serafina folded her arms. He is negotiating. For what? Possibly your boot. Possibly your soul. He is ambitious. Rurik's gaze returned to her face. The hard line of his mouth shifted again. This time the smile almost survived. Then we should draft terms, he said. The first test took place in the lee of the firs. Serafina cut open 6 sacks from 3 wagons. Rurik watched in silence while she separated wheat, grit, chaff, and seal threads on a square of dark cloth. His soldiers watched her hands with the hungry attention of men whose supper depended on facts. The result was worse than she expected. Every sack held sand. Some held more sand than grain. The mold hid at the center, where a careless inspector would miss it. 2 sacks had dead beetles. One had a pebble stamped with blue quarry dust from the capital's North Chapel works. Serafina held that pebble in her palm. "This is not border sand," she said. "This came from the palace district." Rurik's jaw tightened. The quartermaster swore the wagons were sealed at the royal granary. He may have sworn truthfully. Someone could have filled false sacks before sealing, or changed them in a holding yard. "Can your ledgers prove that?" "My ledgers prove what the kennels received. They include cent notes for hound feed and hunt grain stores. My mother believed numbers lied less when dogs checked them." "Your mother was sensible. She was terrifying." "Good." Serafina looked up. Rurik's face had gone flat again, but his eyes were on her fingers. She realized she had rubbed the pebble so hard that grit had cut through her glove. A thin red line marked her thumb. Before she could hide it, he caught her wrist. The contact was careful. It still sent heat up her arm. His hand circled her wrist with complete control and no effort. She could feel the difference between restraint and weakness. He had both strength and the decision not to use it. "Small cut," she said. "Open skin in winter is not small. You command armies. Do you inspect every thumb?" "Only the ones holding evidence." His thumb pressed the heel of her glove back. The motion exposed the cut. He took a clean strip from inside his cloak and wrapped it around her thumb with efficient hands. Serafina meant to make a remark. The words left her when his knuckle brushed the inside of her palm. Rurik looked up. The space between them changed. Snow moved through the fir branches. The soldiers' voices faded. His fingers still held her wrist. His eyes had lowered to her mouth for one dangerous beat before returning to her face. "Mistress Hale," he said quietly, "you are shaking." "I walked all night. That is not the only reason." Serafina should have pulled away. Instead, she leaned half an inch closer, angry that he had noticed, angrier that the notice did not feel cruel. "Do you always diagnose witnesses?" "Only when they arrive with 32 hounds, a stolen fur, and evidence of a planned disappearance." "A planned disappearance. Do not inflate my importance. I rarely need to inflate what is already large." His voice had gone lower. It struck under her ribs with an alarming lack of permission. Captain Biscuit sneezed between them. Serafina snatched her hand back. That was late but effective. Rurik looked at the hound. "He objects. He believes bandages should be paid for in dried liver." "Reasonable." The general gave the hound a strip from his saddlebag. Captain Biscuit accepted it with the solemnity of a treaty signing. By noon, Rurik had turned his column toward Frostgate Keep instead of the capital. Serafina objected immediately. "I said I would help test wagons. I did not agree to become a military attachment." "You have no safe lodging on this road," Rurik said. "Prince Oren will send riders. My keep has walls, witnesses, and enough legal clerks to make a liar regret literacy." That sounded almost charming until the clerks. "My charm is rationed. Your soldiers must suffer. They are alive." He said it without pride. Serafina heard the cost under it. They rode with her hound caravan between the grain wagons and the cavalry. Rurik offered her a spare horse. She refused and walked beside the sleds until the road iced over near a narrow bridge. Buttons slipped first. The sled lurched. Serafina grabbed the trace line, lost her footing, and slid toward the bridge rail. Rurik reached her before the hounds could. One arm locked around her waist and pulled her back against his chest. His other hand caught the sled rope. The motion stopped her hard enough to knock breath from her lungs. For one suspended second, Serafina stood pressed against him from shoulder to hip. His cloak wrapped around her side. His body was winter hard and living hot. She felt his breath at her hairline. "Still objecting to military attachment?" he asked against her ear. Her pulse did something humiliating. "I object to bridges that betray women in public. The bridge will be disciplined." "Severely?" "Without mercy." She looked down at his hand spread over her waist. He released the sled rope, but not her. His thumb had landed over the seam of her coat. Through wool and leather, she still felt the pressure of it. "General," she said. "Yes. Your soldiers are watching. They have been ordered to survive worse." Serafina turned her head. His face was close enough that she could see pale frost in his lashes. The cold-blooded Alpha General did not look cold now. He looked controlled by the width of a knife edge. "I can stand," she said. "I know. Then why are you still holding me?" A pause opened. His answer was very quiet. "Because you nearly fell. That was earlier." "I am aware." The hounds began to howl. Not a danger howl. Worse, a delighted howl. Serafina closed her eyes as all 32 hounds announced to the entire road that their mistress was being held by a tall man and had not bitten him. Rurik released her slowly. "Your pack reports everything," he said. "They were raised in court. Gossip is in the mortar." The hounds kept howling until Grandmother Pike barked once. Silence fell at once. Rurik looked at the old bitch with respect. "I want her on my—" The first thing Serafina Hale heard through her bedroom wall was her fiancé laughing at the word accident. The second thing she heard was Lady Corvina Marrow saying, "Snow hides foolish girls very well." Serafina stood in the middle of her chamber with a silver brush in one hand and a hunting boot in the other. The fire had burned low. The mirror showed a woman of 26 in a dark green house gown, hair half braided, face too still. At her feet, 8 royal winter hounds stopped chewing the same stolen slipper and lifted their heads together. Prince Orenvale spoke again on the other side of the carved panel. His voice had the lazy softness he used at council dinners. "She knows the forest paths. Make her trust the western stag trail. The ravine will do the rest." Corvina gave a small, delighted gasp. "You sound almost cruel." "Cruel would be breaking the betrothal in open court," Oren said. "This is cleaner." A tragic misdirection during the winter hunt. Her hounds will scatter. She will panic. By sunset, father will need a new bride for the border alliance. Serafina lowered the boot. Captain Biscuit, largest of the hounds, rose with the patience of a judge. Duchess followed. Buttons wagged once, then sneezed into the slipper. Oren added, "Besides, she is only the royal kennel master's pretty daughter. My father liked her mother's service record. That does not make her fit to sit beside me." The silver brush bent in Serafina's hand. For 3 breaths, she did nothing. That was important. Her mother had taught her not to loose a hound until the hound understood the shape of the field. So Serafina listened. She heard silk brush stone. She heard Oren lift a cup from the little table in the adjoining guest salon. She heard Corvina murmur that she had already moved the western trail markers. Then Serafina set the brush down and smiled at her hounds. "Good evening, respectable criminals," she whispered. "We're going to practice manners." Every tail began to move. She crossed the room, opened the hidden panel, and stepped into the guest salon with all 8 hounds at her skirts. Oren was standing too close to Corvina beside the wine table. His dark blue coat was unbuttoned at the throat. Corvina's white fur wrap sat over Serafina's own chair. They both turned at once. Serafina looked at the wine, the trail map, the shifted markers drawn in red ink, and the little knife Corvina had used to scrape wax from the royal hunt seals. "My lord," Serafina said, "my lady." Oren went pale. "Suha, this is not what it appears to be." "Excellent," she said, "because it appears to be a planned disappearance with poor handwriting." Corvina recovered faster. She smiled with her lips and not her eyes. "You should not enter rooms without knocking." Serafina lifted 2 fingers. Captain Biscuit put both front paws on Oren's chest and flattened him onto the carpet. Oren made a sound that would not have impressed a rabbit. Duchess seized the hem of his coat and dragged him 3 feet from the wine table. Buttons leapt on Corvina's fur wrap and shook it with such moral fury that white hair filled the air. Mutton, who had never respected royalty, placed one enormous paw on Oren's stomach and licked his chin. "Call them off," Oren shouted. "You wanted me lost in a ravine," Serafina said. I want your collar buttons lost under a settee. We are not the same. Corvina shrieked when Pepper caught the sash of her gown and pulled it loose enough to tangle her ankles. No one was hurt. Only tailoring suffered. The hounds had been trained to catch sleeves, cloaks, straps, and pride. They did their work with frightening cheer. Serafina stepped over Oren's boot and took the trail map. She took the scraped seal knife. She took the little red pouch of false markers from Corvina's hand, while the lady was busy trying to save her sleeve from foxglove. Oren tried to rise. Captain Biscuit lowered his head and breathed directly into the prince's face. He has eaten boiled cabbage, Serafina warned. Make choices with that knowledge. Oren froze. For one wild moment, laughter climbed Serafina's throat. It was sharp and bright and wrong. She let it out anyway. The sound startled Corvina more than the hounds had. Serafina backed toward the panel. I will send someone for the furniture. You may want new furniture. Also new souls. Sarah, Oren said, voice breaking. You cannot do this. Watch me. She whistled once. 8 hounds released silk, wool, buttons, and dignity. They rushed after her through the panel. Serafina shut it, bolted it from her side, and ran. She laughed down the corridor until the laugh cracked. She laughed past the tapestry of the first winter hunt. She laughed down the servant's stair, while Buttons carried Corvina's fur wrap in his mouth like a fallen enemy banner. By the time she reached the kennels, the laugh had become a sob she could not swallow. The royal kennels were warm with straw, iron stoves, and dog breath. 32 hounds lifted their heads from their beds. The youngest pups tumbled over each other to reach her. The old lead bitch, Grandmother Pike, opened one eye and judged everyone. Serafina shut the kennel door behind her and pressed both hands to her mouth. Oren had planned the western ravine. Corvina had moved the markers. The prince had said only the kennel master's daughter. Only pretty, only useful until a cleaner bride appeared. Her knees weakened. Captain Biscuit leaned his weight against her thigh. Duchess pushed her head under Serafina's hand. Buttons dropped the fur wrap and sat on it, proud and unhelpful. Serafina allowed herself 12 breaths. On the 13th, she stood. Crying was permitted. Collapse was not. She crossed to the tack room and lit 2 lamps. The kennel ledgers waited in their cabinet. She pulled the winter feed book, the hunt route register, the injury log, and the sealed copy of the hound master's oath. Her mother had made 3 rules for a woman cornered by a noble house. First, leave with proof. Second, leave with witnesses. Third, leave loudly enough that silence becomes suspicious. Serafina took all 3 rules personally. She packed the ledgers in oilcloth. She strapped grain pouches to 6 sled harnesses. She opened the iron cage where the hunt whistles hung and took the black horn whistle that had belonged to her mother. Then she paused at the smallest hook. A child's whistle hung there on a frayed blue cord. It was plain bone, carved with a crooked moon. A boy had given it to her in a snowstorm when she was 8. He had found her crying under a pine before she ever came to the palace. He had wrapped his own scarf around her and said, very severely, that brave girls were still allowed to ask for help before freezing to death. She had never learned his name. Serafina put the old whistle around her neck. The hounds watched with bright eyes. We are not sneaking away, she told them. We are conducting a professional relocation. Grandmother Pike groaned. Do not take that tone. 1 hour later, the eastern kennel gate opened on a sight the palace would discuss for years. Serafina Hale walked out under a hard white moon wearing her training coat, tall boots, and a belt full of whistles. Behind her came 32 royal winter hounds in travel harness. 6 dragged sleds of ledgers, feed, medicines, blankets, and 1 stolen white fur wrap that Buttons refused to surrender. At the front, Captain Biscuit carried Oren's torn collar in his mouth. Serafina stopped at the public hunt board in the stable court. She pinned the red pouch of false trail markers beside the royal map. Under it she wrote, in the bold hand her mother had beaten into her, the western trail was tampered with. Ask Prince Oren why. After a moment, she added, do not feed traitors to the hounds. It upsets the hounds. The stable boys read it twice. One of them whispered, Mistress Hale, where are you going? To the border, Serafina said. The hounds require fresher company. Captain Biscuit wagged. No one stopped her. By dawn, the palace bells were behind them. The city road lay buried under clean snow. and Serafina had cried enough to leave salt on her scarf. Her hounds moved around her in disciplined waves. Some ran ahead to read the wind. Some guarded the sleds. Buttons kept trying to wear Corvina's fur wrap and falling sideways into drifts. Serafina should have gone south to her mother's cousin. She should have sought a magistrate. She should have stayed in the palace and forced a hearing before Oren could prepare his lies. Instead, she had chosen the border road. The border was where grain shortages were whispered about in the palace kitchens. It was where soldiers wrote complaints that disappeared inside sealed offices. It was where her mother had once said truth traveled faster because hungry men had less patience for court perfume. It was also the road Oren would least expect a kennel woman to take with 32 hounds and several sleds of incriminating paper. At mid-morning, Grandmother Pike stopped beside a frozen ditch and growled. Serafina raised a fist. Every hound halted. The road ahead curved through black firs. Beyond the firs came the low iron sound of horses moving under armor. Not palace riders. The rhythm was heavier, colder, controlled by people who expected ambush and had survived many. Captain Biscuit moved in front of Serafina. "Easy," she said. The first rider appeared between the trees. He was tall even on a tall black horse. A charcoal cloak hung from shoulders built for war rather than court. His hair was black, wind-torn, and swept back from a face cut with hard lines. A scar crossed the edge of his jaw. His eyes were the pale steel gold of an alpha who had stopped asking rooms for permission years ago. Behind him rode 20 border soldiers, all lean, all cold, all watching the hounds with the same wary calculation. The lead rider reined in. Serafina looked up at him. He looked down at her sleds, her hounds, her red eyes, and the stolen fur wrap currently wrapped around Button's middle. "Is this a rebellion?" he asked, "or a kennel exercise with poor paperwork?" Serafina wiped her face with the back of one glove. "That depends who is asking. General Rurik Voss of the Frost March." She stiffened. Every servant in the palace knew that name. The border alpha general was called cold-blooded by people who had never spent a winter without firewood. He had broken raider sieges, dragged 3 corrupt quartermasters to judgment, and once refused to bow to Oren at a feast until the prince apologized to a wounded soldier. Rurik's gaze moved over the hounds again. "And you are?" Serafina Hale, royal hound trainer. Former fiancé of Prince Oren, unless he has developed courage during breakfast. One of the soldiers coughed. Rurik did not blink. "Former? He planned to lose me in a ravine during the winter hunt. I objected with dogs." The general's horse shifted. Rurik's gloved hand tightened on the reins. "Did you kill him?" he asked. "No." "Did the dogs?" "Also no. They mauled his tailoring." A second soldier turned his face away. Rurik leaned slightly forward. Snow dusted the black sweep of his hair. "You left the palace with every royal hound." "Not every hound," Serafina said. "I left 3 elderly spaniels. They are politically unreliable." For a moment, his mouth changed. It was not a smile. It was the memory of one. Then a cartwheel cracked behind his line. A grain wagon lurched sideways in the road. 2 soldiers jumped down to steady it. One sack fell from the back, burst against a stone, and spilled pale kernels across the snow. Serafina smelled the problem before anyone spoke. The hounds smelled it too. Grandmother Pike lowered her nose. Captain Biscuit sneezed and looked offended. Rurik turned in the saddle. "Hold that sack." Serafina walked past him without asking. A border sergeant moved to block her, then stopped when 32 hounds politely considered removing him from the path. She crouched beside the torn sack. Wheat should smell dry, grassy, faintly sweet. This smelled of cellar mold, river silt, and something sharp that belonged in mortar. She pushed her fingers into the grain and rubbed. Grit scratched her glove. "Sand," she said. Rurik dismounted in one smooth motion. He landed close enough that she felt the impact through the frozen road. "How much?" Serafina lifted a handful. Grain and pale grit slid between her fingers. "Enough to cheat a scale. Enough to break teeth. Enough to starve a keep while the ledger says you were fed." The nearest soldiers went very still. Rurik crouched beside her. His shoulder nearly brushed hers. He smelled of cold leather, pine smoke, and iron discipline. Up close, his face looked younger than the stories and more tired than the scar allowed. "Can your hounds track where the sand entered the sacks?" he asked. Serafina glanced at the torn seal. The wax mark was royal blue, but the press had slipped. Her kennel ledgers tracked feed shipments by scent for the hunt dogs. Grain theft always left a trail if someone cared to put a nose to it. "Yes," she said, "if you stop breathing down my collar." His eyes lowered to the space between them. Serafina realized his gloved hand was braced on the snow beside hers. Their fingers were close enough for the heat of him to reach her through winter air. Her heart, treacherous animal, struck once against her ribs. Rurik did not move away. "I breathe where the evidence is," he said. "Then the evidence is about to file a complaint." A hound sneezed directly into the spilled grain. Serafina closed her eyes. "That is Mutton. He has strong views on fraud." Rurik looked at the hound, then back at Serafina. "Mistress Hale, I was riding to the capital to demand the grain owed to my garrisons. It appears the capital has sent me sand and a witness. I am not capital property. I did not say you were." His answer came too fast for courtesy. It landed between them with a weight she felt. Serafina stood. He stood with her. Because he was very tall and too close, she had to tilt her head back. Oren had used height as decoration. Rurik wore it like a wall built in a blizzard. "I can help you test the wagons," she said. "Then I keep moving." "Where?" "Away from ravines. The road ahead is borderland. Wolves answered to me there. Hounds answered to me everywhere." One of his eyebrows rose. Captain Biscuit chose that moment to sit on Rurik's boot. The general looked down. Serafina folded her arms. "He is negotiating." "For what?" "Possibly your boot. Possibly your soul. He is ambitious." Rurik's gaze returned to her face. The hard line of his mouth shifted again. This time the smile almost survived. "Then we should draft terms," he said. The first test took place in the lee of the firs. Serafina cut open 6 sacks from 3 wagons. Rurik watched in silence while she separated wheat, grit, chaff, and seal threads on a square of dark cloth. His soldiers watched her hands with the hungry attention of men whose supper depended on facts. The result was worse than she expected. Every sack held sand. Some held more sand than grain. The mold hid at the center where a careless inspector would miss it. 2 sacks had dead beetles. One had a pebble stamped with blue quarry dust from the capital's North Chapel works. Serafina held that pebble in her palm. "This is not border sand," she said. "This came from the palace district." Rurik's jaw tightened. The quartermaster swore the wagons were sealed at the royal granary. He may have sworn truthfully. Someone could have filled false sacks before sealing, or changed them in a holding yard. "Can your ledgers prove that?" "My ledgers prove what the kennels received. They include cent notes for hound feed and hunt grain stores. My mother believed numbers lied less when dogs checked them." "Your mother was sensible. She was terrifying." "Good." Serafina looked up. Rurik's face had gone flat again, but his eyes were on her fingers. She realized she had rubbed the pebble so hard that grit had cut through her glove. A thin red line marked her thumb. Before she could hide it, he caught her wrist. The contact was careful. It still sent heat up her arm. His hand circled her wrist with complete control and no effort. She could feel the difference between restraint and weakness. He had both strength and the decision not to use it. "Small cut," she said. "Open skin in winter is not small. You command armies. Do you inspect every thumb?" "Only the ones holding evidence." His thumb pressed the heel of her glove back. The motion exposed the cut. He took a clean strip from inside his cloak and wrapped it around her thumb with efficient hands. Serafina meant to make a remark. The words left her when his knuckle brushed the inside of her palm. Rurik looked up. The space between them changed. Snow moved through the fir branches. The soldiers' voices faded. His fingers still held her wrist. His eyes had lowered to her mouth for one dangerous beat before returning to her face. "Mistress Hale," he said quietly, "you are shaking." "I walked all night. That is not the only reason." Serafina should have pulled away. Instead, she leaned half an inch closer, angry that he had noticed, angrier that the notice did not feel cruel. "Do you always diagnose witnesses?" "Only when they arrive with 32 hounds, a stolen fur, and evidence of a planned disappearance." "A planned disappearance. Do not inflate my importance. I rarely need to inflate what is already large." His voice had gone lower. It struck under her ribs with an alarming lack of permission. Captain Biscuit sneezed between them. Serafina snatched her hand back. That was late but effective. Rurik looked at the hound. He objects. He believes bandages should be paid for in dried liver. Reasonable. The general gave the hound a strip from his saddlebag. Captain Biscuit accepted it with the solemnity of a treaty signing. By noon, Rurik had turned his column toward Frostgate Keep instead of the capital. Serafina objected immediately. I said I would help test wagons. I did not agree to become a military attachment. You have no safe lodging on this road, Rurik said. Prince Oren will send riders. My keep has walls, witnesses, and enough legal clerks to make a liar regret literacy. That sounded almost charming until the clerks. My charm is rationed. Your soldiers must suffer. They are alive. He said it without pride. Serafina heard the cost under it. They rode with her hound caravan between the grain wagons and the cavalry. Rurik offered her a spare horse. She refused and walked beside the sleds until the road iced over near a narrow bridge. Buttons slipped first. The sled lurched. Serafina grabbed the trace line, lost her footing, and slid toward the bridge rail. Rurik reached her before the hounds could. One arm locked around her waist and pulled her back against his chest. His other hand caught the sled rope. The motion stopped her hard enough to knock breath from her lungs. For one suspended second, Serafina stood pressed against him from shoulder to hip. His cloak wrapped around her side. His body was winter hard and living hot. She felt his breath at her hairline. Still objecting to military attachment? He asked against her ear. Her pulse did something humiliating. I object to bridges that betray women in public. The bridge will be disciplined. Severely? Without mercy. She looked down at his hand spread over her waist. He released the sled rope, but not her. His thumb had landed over the seam of her coat. Through wool and leather, she still felt the pressure of it. General, she said. Yes. Your soldiers are watching. They have been ordered to survive worse. Serafina turned her head. His face was close enough that she could see pale frost in his lashes. The cold-blooded Alpha General did not look cold now. He looked controlled by the width of a knife edge. I can stand, she said. I know. Then why are you still holding me? A pause opened. His answer was very quiet. Because you nearly fell. That was earlier. I am aware. The hounds began to howl. Not a danger howl. Worse, a delighted howl. Serafina closed her eyes as all 32 hounds announced to the entire road that their mistress was being held by a tall man and had not bitten him. Rurik released her slowly. Your pack reports everything, he said. They were raised in court. Gossip is in the mortar. The hounds kept howling until Grandmother Pike barked once. Silence fell at once. Rurik looked at the old bitch with respect. I want her on my council. You cannot afford her. What does she demand? Blankets, meat, and the right to judge men from a cushion. Half my council already does that. Serafina laughed before she could stop herself. The sound surprised them both. Rurik looked at her as if the laugh had shown him a door he had not known existed. Serafina looked away first. Frostgate Keep rose from the border cliffs at dusk. It was not beautiful in the palace sense. No gold domes, no painted saints, no perfumed arches. It was black stone, smoke, iron gates, and men on the walls with crossbows. The mountain wind struck it and broke. Hungry soldiers lined the yard when the wagons entered. Their cheeks were hollow. Their winter coats had been patched too often. A young guard in his early 20s stared at the grain sacks with such plain hope that Serafina's stomach twisted. Rurik dismounted before the main steps. No sack opens for the kitchens until Mistress Hale and my quartermaster inspect it, he ordered. Any man who steals before inspection eats sand first. The soldiers managed a tired laugh. A young woman in a brown grain-watch coat pushed through them with a ledger under one arm and a steel staff across her back. Her dark braid was pinned high, her nose had been broken once, and every starving soldier made room for her without being told. General, if the capital has sent us more rotten wheat, I am feeding the royal seals to the goats. Grain Watch Captain Marave, Rurik said. She monitors the border grain line, audits every wagon, and breaks the fingers of men who think hunger is paperwork. Captain, this is Serafina Hale, Royal Hound Trainer. She found sand in the shipment. Marave looked Serafina up and down. You brought dogs. Hounds, Serafina corrected. They eat. With enthusiasm. Then they are soldiers. Welcome. Serafina liked her at once. Marave gave no court bow. She offered Serafina a square nod, then crouched and held one hand toward Captain Biscuit. The hound sniffed her knuckles, sneezed once, and accepted her as a public servant with potential. He approves, Serafina said. Good, Marave replied. I have been rejected by bishops. I could not survive rejection by a working dog. Rurik said, Captain Vey is honest, armed, and impossible to flatter. A rare government office, Serafina said. Marave pointed her ledger at the sacks. Then let us make it useful before someone important lies at me. Within an hour, the keep yard became an inspection hall. Torches burned in iron baskets. Sacks were opened under guard. Serafina set hounds in pairs to scent mold, silt, and false grain oil. Marave weighed samples, sealed jars, and made every driver say his route aloud in front of witnesses. Rurik stood over the work with the stillness of a locked gate. One wagoner tried to step backward when Duchess found silt under the clean top layer. Marave caught him by the elbow, turned his wrist with neat efficiency, and sat him on a flour barrel before he could blink. Running makes ink suspicious, she told him. The wagoner swallowed. I was stretching, then stretched toward the truth. Serafina tried not to laugh and failed. Rurik looked at Marave with the expression of a commander watching a regulation write itself. More than half the shipment was fraudulent. The soldiers did not shout. That was worse. Hunger had already burned the noise out of them. Serafina watched a young guard pick 3 good kernels from a bad sack and place them in his pocket. Not stealing, saving proof that the good grain had existed somewhere before it was taken. Her throat tightened. Rurik saw her looking. This is why I was riding to the capital, he said. The Frost March paid taxes in silver, timber, and service. The royal granary answered with excuses. Oren knew. I sent 6 petitions. He signed 3 dismissals. The prince's name turned the cold inside her into a cleaner thing. Then we will give him a 7th document, she said. One he cannot dismiss. Rurik turned toward her. Serafina was tired. Her eyes burned. Her thumb hurt. Her heart had been dragged over stones by a man who had planned to lose her in snow. Yet standing in that yard, among hungry soldiers and honest hounds, she felt the first hard shape of purpose. I need a table, she said. A lamp. Fresh wax. Thread from every sack. A map of the capital granary yards. Access to your petitions. And dried liver for the witnesses. Marave grunted. The dog witnesses? They work cheap. Better than most inspectors, Marave said. They cannot read a bribe and pretend it is weather. Captain Biscuit wagged once, as if accepting the promotion. Rurik's gaze did not leave Serafina's face. You will have all of it, and I am not your prisoner. No, I decide when to leave. Yes, I keep my own room. His eyes changed at the edges. Also yes. Serafina heard the roughness under the last answer and felt heat rise under her collar. She looked down at the ledgers before her face betrayed her. Good, she said. Then bring me your fraudulent wheat. Buttons trotted past, wearing Corvina's fur wrap again. Marave stared. Why is that one dressed like a bankrupt duchess? Evidence, Serafina said. Rurik looked at the hound. Against fashion? Against many things. They worked until the moon stood high over the keep. Serafina discovered 3 patterns before midnight. First, the worst sacks came from wagons marked with the blue seal of the Royal Chapel District. Second, the thread used to stitch them was not granary hemp, but fine white court cord. Third, each false sack carried a faint scent of rose oil. Corvina Marrow wore rose oil. She had spilled it in Serafina's bedroom once, and complained that the hounds had sneezed for a day. When Serafina told Rurik, he did not look surprised. Lady Marrow's father owns warehouses near the chapel works, he said. Of course he does. Her family also brokers grain contracts. Of course they do. Prince Oren approved the winter reserve transfer 3 weeks ago. Serafina set down her pen. Of course he did. The room assigned to the investigation had once been a chapel. It now held maps, sacks, scales, and hounds asleep under every bench. The hearth gave off a hard orange heat. Rurik stood at the long table beside Serafina, one hand braced near her inkpot. He had removed his armor. Without it, he looked less like a fortress and more dangerous. Black will fit close across his shoulders. His throat was open at the collar, showing a narrow scar near the base. Serafina had not meant to notice. She noticed thoroughly. "You should sleep," he said. "So should you. I sleep when my keep is fed." "Then you have been awake since autumn." "Close." She looked up sharply. That was not a joke. It was an approximation. "General." "Rurik," he said. The name sat in the warm room between them. Serafina looked down at her ledger. "You should not give me your first name while I am holding ink. I may use it to forge something." "What would you forge?" "A requisition for blankets." "Your hounds need more." "My hounds?" "Your soldiers, then." Quartermaster Mara, they classified mine as soldiers. "I am adapting." Rurik leaned closer to read the ledger line she had marked. His arm brushed hers. Neither moved. "You blush when you are angry," he said. Serafina's pen stopped. "I do not." "You do. That is not useful evidence. It tells me when to stop speaking. And yet you continue, because I also want to see what happens." Her breath caught. The silence turned thick. Rurik's shoulder remained against hers. His hand shifted on the table, not touching her, close enough that one small movement would change the night. Serafina could smell soap on his skin under leather and smoke. She could see a tiny line of exhaustion beside his mouth. "What happens," she said very quietly, "is that I remember I was betrayed this morning." His face changed at once. He drew back by half a step, not in rejection but in discipline. "Then I stop." The loss of heat annoyed her. The gentleness annoyed her more. Serafina turned toward him. "I did not ask you to freeze." Rurik looked at her for a long moment. "Tell me where the line is. I will stand on the correct side." "That sounds very noble." "It is practical. I do not want to become another man who takes your choices." Her anger softened before she could protect it. "The line moves," she said. "Today it is somewhere between being held on a bridge and being kissed over forged grain reports." His eyes lowered to her mouth. "That is a narrow border," he said. "You command borders." "Not that one." For 3 breaths, neither of them moved. Then Buttons rolled under the table in his sleep, kicked both hind legs, and struck Rurik's boot with a thud. Serafina exhaled a laugh. Rurik looked down at the hound with calm betrayal. "He has opinions," she said. "He has terrible timing." "No, that was good timing. Terrible timing would have been 2 breaths later." Rurik's gaze returned to her so fast her stomach dipped. "Then I owe him dried liver," he said. She did not sleep much that night. Her room was small, clean, and plainly prepared by soldiers who had no idea what women needed but respected blankets. Someone had placed 4 on the bed, 2 on the chair, 1 over the washstand, and 1 on the floor where Captain Biscuit immediately lay down. Serafina took off her boots and sat on the edge of the bed. The old bone whistle rested against her throat. Oren's voice kept returning. "Only." The word had teeth. She pressed both fists into the blanket. The tears came without drama this time. They came because she had once wanted a husband who laughed with her at morning hound chaos. She had once imagined Oren watching her train pups and saying he was proud. She had spent years turning his distracted affection into proof of a future. Now that future lay on a salon carpet under Captain Biscuit's paws. The door creaked. Serafina wiped her face. "If you are a soldier, retreat. If you are a hound, enter quietly." Grandmother Pike pushed the door open with her nose. Behind her stood Rurik holding a covered cup. Serafina sat straighter. "You are not a hound. I brought one as a credential." Grandmother Pike walked in and took the rug. Rurik remained outside the threshold. "Marave makes a winter herb drink. It tastes like boiled pine in punishment. It helps with shock. You're selling it poorly. I am honest about beverages." She stood and crossed to the door. He handed her the cup without stepping inside. Steam curled between them. "Thank you," she said. His gaze moved over her face. He saw the tears. He did not mention them. "There will be riders from the capital by morning," he said. "Oren will call you unstable. He will call the hound stolen property. He may claim you attacked him without cause. I left the trail markers on the hunt board." "Good. I took the knife." "Better. I made his collar a dog toy." This time Rurik did smile. It was small, brief, and devastating. "Necessary," he said. Serafina looked down at the cup because looking at him became difficult. "I am not unstable," she said. "I know. I am angry, and embarrassed, and apparently wanted dead, but I am not unstable. I know. Do you say anything else? When required. She drank. The herb brew did taste like pine and punishment. She grimaced. Rurik watched her mouth again, then looked away as if the wall required military attention. General, she said. Rurik. Rurik. His name changed the air a second time. Serafina lifted the cup. Thank you for stopping at my door. Thank you for not entering without permission. And thank you for looking at the wall as if it insulted your ancestors. It did. What did it say? That I have poor judgment. Does it often tell the truth? His eyes came back to hers. Tonight, yes. The cup warmed her fingers. His voice warmed everything else. Serafina should have closed the door. Instead, she let herself stand there with one bare foot on cold stone and one hound snoring behind her. Rurik's shadow filled the threshold without crossing it. Sleep, Serafina, he said. The way he said her name made it feel less damaged. You too. I will try. That was not an agreement. No. She narrowed her eyes. You are difficult. I have references. She closed the door before she smiled too much. Morning at Frostgate Keep began with a horn, a curse, and a hound stealing a sausage from a lieutenant's hand. Serafina woke before the second horn. Habit pulled her from bed while the sky was still iron gray. At the palace, this was the hour she crossed the kennel yard with warm mash, brushed snow from every muzzle, and greeted each hound by title. The ritual had survived fevers, royal inspections, Oren's board visits, and one unfortunate spring when Buttons fell in love with a laundry basket. She found the Frostgate hounds, her own hounds, and 4 suspicious border mutts gathered in the lower yard around a cook who looked prepared to resign from life. Serafina put 2 fingers to her mouth and whistled. Every dog sat. The cook almost dropped the sausage pan. Rurik stood near the armory steps with a mug in hand. He wore no cloak despite the cold. His black training shirt clung to his shoulders, and his hair was still damp from washing. Serafina's brain, usually competent before breakfast, mislaid several useful thoughts. He watched her line the hounds in rows. Good morning, honorable criminals, she said. 36 tails moved. Captain Biscuit, you look innocent. That means you are guilty. Duchess, stop judging the cook. He has suffered enough. Mutton, remove your paw from that boot. It still contains a lieutenant. Buttons, if you are wearing stolen fur before sunrise, you must at least stand straight. The soldiers gathered on the steps began to grin. Serafina moved down the line, touching each nose. Every hound gave a different greeting. Captain Biscuit pressed his forehead into her palm. Duchess offered one paw. Mutton leaned so hard she had to brace. Grandmother Pike allowed one royal tap, and then looked away in contempt. When Serafina reached the young pups, she crouched. And good morning to the tiny disasters. Did we dream of eating glove leather? We did. Did we repent? We did not. A laugh broke from the soldiers. Rurik's mug had stopped halfway to his mouth. Serafina straightened and caught him looking. For once, the general did not hide it. What? She asked. I have watched men confess under interrogation with less discipline than those pups show for you. Pups respond to consistency, food, and being told when they are ridiculous. Men are less advanced. The soldiers laughed harder. Rurik's gaze warmed. You may brief my officers after breakfast. On grain fraud. On being less advanced than pups. She pointed at him. Do not tempt me before tea. Breakfast became a council because Frostgate had no talent for leisure. They gathered in the old chapel room again. Marave brought porridge thinned beyond pride. Rurik's captains brought maps, petitions, and a stack of replies from the capital. Serafina read them with growing rage. The palace had dismissed every complaint as border exaggeration. The Crown Office claimed weather delays. The Granary Office claimed rodent loss. Oren had signed one note in his own hand. General Voss must learn that hunger makes wolves dramatic. Serafina stared at that line until the ink blurred. Week set beside hit. His knee brushed hers under the table. It might have been accidental. It did not move. He wrote this while my men were cutting mold from bread, Rurik said. He wrote it because he has never watched a young border guard save 3 kernels in his pocket, she answered. A captain with a scarred cheek looked up. You saw Tobin do that? Yes. The room quieted. Serafina closed the letter. We need more than proof of bad grain. We need proof of intent, profit, and chain of custody. If this is only incompetence, Orrin will blame a clerk. If it is theft, he will blame a dead clerk. If Lady Marrow's family is involved, they will blame a foreign merchant. Marave nodded. Then we need their own numbers. And scent, Seraphina said. Numbers can be copied. Scent travels poorly through lies. Rurik pointed to the capital map. 3 places: Royal Granary, Chapel Warehouse, North Weighing Yard. The wagons passed all 3 before coming to us. The rose oil was in the sacks, Seraphina said. Corvina touched them, or her personal servants did. One officer frowned. Could perfume cling that long? To court cord, yes. To wax, less so. To hounds, forever, because they are petty archivists. Duchess lifted her head from under the table, as if sighted. Rurik leaned toward the map. His shoulder touched Seraphina's again. This time the contact lasted. If I ride to the capital now, Orrin will bar the gates. He cannot bar the winter hunt. Marave's eyes sharpened. Seraphina tapped the marked route register. All noble houses must attend in 3 days. The hunt opens the Old Oath Road. Hounds, riders, grain sponsors, chapel officers, and border envoys gather in one place. If I accuse him there, he cannot hide the accusation inside a clerk's drawer. Dangerous, Rurik said. Yes. Public. Yes. He already planned to lose you there. Then he will expect fear, not an audit. Rurik turned his head toward her. His eyes were close. You intend to walk back into the trap? No. I intend to bring the trap witnesses. Captain Biscuit sneezed under the table. An illegal team, she added. Preferably one that bites cloth. The plan required a day of ugly work. Seraphina sorted thread samples. Marave wrote chain of custody statements in a hand so sharp it looked capable of cutting bread. Rurik's captains interviewed wagoners who had been too frightened to speak before. Marave found the turn in the route first. She slapped one inked finger onto the map. Here. Every false wagon stopped at the chapel warehouse after the royal seal was applied. Honest wagons passed straight through. Rotten ones took the pretty road. The pretty road? Seraphina asked. The one with guards who call theft logistics. A pattern emerged. Each driver had been told the delay came from Prince Orrin's personal hunt preparations. Each received a sealed coin purse from a Marrow steward. Each had also been warned that Captain Vey was a hysterical woman who disliked noble accounting. Marave smiled without warmth. I adore noble accounting. It confesses when you hold it upside down. By afternoon, Rurik sent 3 scouts to intercept one such steward on the road. They returned with the steward, 2 purses, and a face that suggested he had considered running until Captain Biscuit smiled at him. The steward broke in 7 minutes. Seraphina did not enjoy the man's fear. She enjoyed his documents. He carried a small coded invoice listing good grain weights, sand weights, and payments to chapel warehouse guards. The largest notation bore Corvina's private mark, a rose pierced by a pin. Beneath it was an instruction. Prince Orrin wants the kennel woman away before the hearing. Make sure the western trail remains open. Rurik read the line once. The room grew cold. He gave a written order, Marave said. A stupid written order. She laid the document flat and pinned one corner with her thumb. A fresh bruise darkened her knuckles from the wagoner who had tried to be athletic with the truth. He did not write, I am stealing grain because I am a peacock with a title, Marave said. Sadly, but the order is enough. It moves the western trail open, pulls the hound master away, and sends the chapel warehouse officers to handle the sealed sacks without public weighers. Seraphina looked from the order to the map. So Orrin did not just want me gone. He needed my hounds gone. Marave nodded. A lie is easiest when the noses are removed. Buttons lifted his head from the corner, deeply offended on behalf of noses everywhere. Vanity makes people use stationery, Seraphina said. Her voice sounded steadier than her hands felt. Rurik noticed. He always noticed. He took the paper from her fingers before she crushed it. Walk with me, he said. It was not a request, but it was not a command either. It was a rope thrown before she sank. They left the chapel room through a side door and stepped into the wall walk. The wind hit hard. Below, the hounds chased one another between snow piles while soldiers pretended not to watch. Beyond the keep, The border forest stretched dark and white toward the old hunt road. Serafina gripped the stone parapet. I wanted to humiliate him. I wanted his buttons scattered. I wanted him frightened for 1/10 of the time he meant me to be frightened. You did humiliate him. Not enough. Rurik stood beside her, close enough to block part of the wind. No, not enough. The agreement loosened something in her chest. People keep expecting me to be sad in a quiet way, she said. I am sad, but I also want to knock his teeth loose with a ledger. A heavy ledger? The feed register from last winter. 400 pages. Excellent spine. Practical. She looked at him. Rurik's face remained serious, but his eyes were not. That nearly undid her. Serafina laughed once, then covered her mouth. The laugh shook into a sob. She hated that. She hated him witnessing it. She hated that he did not look away in embarrassment or step forward to smother her in comfort she had not requested. He simply opened his cloak. Not his arms. His cloak. The offer was absurdly formal and dangerously intimate. That is not a military tactic, she said. It is shelter. Shelter often becomes tactic in male hands. Then take the cloak, not the man. She looked at the black wool hanging open. He was letting cold into his own shirt. The wind cut across the wall and lifted her hair from its braid. She stepped closer before courage could cool. Rurik wrapped the cloak around her shoulders. For a while neither spoke. She stood against his chest, facing the forest. His arms held the cloak around her, not trapping, not loose either. The warmth was immediate and unfair. Serafina's cheek brushed his shirt. His heart beat slow under her ear, though she could feel how much of that steadiness was work. You are very warm for someone called cold-blooded, she said. The title was assigned by idiots. Many titles are. His chin almost touched her hair. What title would you choose? For you. For yourself. She went still. Only the kennel master's daughter. Only pretty. The wind dragged snow along the parapet. I do not know anymore, she said. His arms tightened by a fraction. Then do not let him name you while you are still bleeding. The words entered quietly and stayed. Serafina turned inside the cloak. They were too close. Her hands landed against his chest to steady herself. Muscle shifted under her palms. Rurik looked down at her hands first, then her face. There, she said, softer than she meant. That sounded wise. Are you ill? Severely. Symptoms? Poor judgment. Wall confirmed it. She smiled. His gaze dropped to that smile. The air between them tightened again. This time no hound stood near enough to save them. Rurik lifted one hand slowly, giving her time to step back. She did not. His fingers touched a loose strand of hair at her cheek and drew it away from her mouth. Serafina forgot the wind. This is near the line, he said. Yes. Has it moved? A little. Which direction? She rose on her toes and kissed the corner of his mouth. It was brief. Barely a kiss. Still, it struck through both of them. Rurik inhaled once, sharply. His hand moved to the back of her neck, then stopped before pressure became demand. Serafina felt that restraint. She liked it. She resented it. She wanted to test it with scientific cruelty. That was not forged grain reports, she whispered. No. It was also not quite a kiss. His thumb brushed the hair below her ear. Do you require accuracy? In all investigations. Rurik bent his head. Captain Biscuit barked from the yard below. A soldier shouted. General, the steward fainted again. Rurik closed his eyes. Serafina dropped her forehead against his chest and began to laugh. 2 breaths later, she said, I am going to promote that dog to enemy command. You cannot. He already holds a senior office. The laughter lasted longer than it should have. When it ended, the grief had not vanished. Nothing so convenient happened. But grief no longer held the only chair inside her. That evening, a palace rider reached Frostgate with a sealed order. Rurik received him in the keep hall with Serafina at his right and 32 hounds occupying the lower steps. The rider's face twitched when Button sniffed his boot. The order accused Serafina Hale of theft, assault, and emotional volatility. It demanded the immediate return of the royal hounds, the stolen hunt ledgers, and Lady Marrow's white fur wrap. It described Prince Orin's injuries as severe humiliation, though the scribe had crossed out humiliation and replaced it with bruising. Serafina appreciated the first draft. Rurik read the letter aloud without expression. Then he looked at the writer. "Reply," he said. "The hounds are material witnesses in a grain fraud investigation. The ledgers are evidence. The fur wrap is being held by a dog of uncertain allegiance. Prince Oren may petition the Winter Hunt Tribunal if he wishes to dispute custody." The writer swallowed. "My general, His Highness also says Mistress Hale is not to attend the hunt." Serafina stepped forward. "How thoughtful. Did he mention the ravine?" The writer looked away too fast. Rurik saw it. "So did every soldier in the hall." "Ask him," Serafina said pleasantly, "whether he wants me to bring the red trail markers, or whether he prefers to identify them from memory." The rider left at speed. The next day passed in preparation. Serafina trained the hounds to identify 3 scents: chapel quarry dust, rose oil, and mold hidden under clean grain. Rurik assigned soldiers to carry evidence chests and protect witnesses. Marave prepared duplicate ledgers, so no one could steal the only proof. Near noon, Rurik found Serafina in the lower yard teaching border soldiers how to work with the hounds. "Do not shout low. Offer scent cloth flat. Do not wave it in his face unless you want him to think you are the clue." A broad soldier named Jory held out a cloth to Duchess. Duchess sniffed, turned, and sat in front of Rurik. The yard went quiet. Serafina covered her smile. "Interesting." Rurik looked at the hound. "Explain." "Duchess found the scent on you." "What scent?" Serafina took the cloth from Jory. It held pine soap, smoke, and the faint iron tang of Rurik's armor oil. "Apparently the exercise cloth was not grain fraud," she said. "It was you." Jory looked horrified. "General, I did not mean to imply you were evidence." "Everyone is evidence eventually," Rurik said. Serafina liked that too much. Rurik walked toward her. The soldiers suddenly found reasons to adjust straps, examine snow, and become furniture. He stopped close enough that Duchess, still seated, had to lean against both their legs. "You are enjoying this," he said. "Immensely. At my expense. Your expense appears durable." His mouth curved. "What is the correction? For a false alert?" The handler apologizes to the hound, resets the scent, and praises the correct behavior. "Then apologize." "I am not the handler." "You are always the handler." That should not have sounded intimate. It did. Serafina held his gaze. "Fine. Duchess, I apologize for asking you to identify fraud when General Voss was standing nearby being suspiciously scented." Duchess wagged once. Rurik bent, took the scent cloth, and held it out again. His shoulder brushed Serafina's hip as he crouched. She felt the contact all the way up her spine. "Try again," he told the hound. Duchess sniffed the corrected cloth, crossed the yard, and put her nose on a marked sand sack. The soldiers cheered. Rurik stood. "Good." Serafina looked up at him. "That is all." "Good. She saved your honor." "My honor has survived worse than a hound's nose." "Has it survived wearing Corvina's fur wrap?" His eyes narrowed. "Do not test command structure." "I would never." Buttons appeared behind him dragging the white wrap. The entire yard inhaled. Rurik did not turn around. "Mistress Hale." "Yes." "Is there a hound behind me with enemy fabric?" "No." A pause. "Define no." "There is a hound behind you with evidence." Jory made a strangled sound. Rurik turned. Buttons placed the wrap over the general's boot and looked proud. Serafina expected Rurik to scowl. Instead he reached down, lifted the wrap, and draped it over one forearm as if accepting a ceremonial mantle. "If I must enter the winter hunt with this," he said, "I will declare war on fashion." The soldiers laughed until Marave shouted that anyone with lungs that strong could carry evidence chests. Later, when the yard emptied, Rurik walked Serafina to the kennels built against the inner wall. The hounds settled around them in straw and lamplight. Outside, wind climbed the stones. Inside, the smells of clean fur, leather, and warm mash wrapped around her like something close to home. Rurik stopped beside a pen of young hounds. "You look different here. Covered in hair?" "At ease." She fed a pup from her palm. "Kennels make sense. Eat, work, play, sleep. If a hound loves you, he shows it. If he hates you, he also shows it. Court could learn from that. You belong there less than they told you." Her hands stilled. "Do not be kind just because I am useful," she said. "I am not kind. That is your defense." It is my reputation. Your reputation is terrible company. I know. The quiet after that was not uncomfortable. It was worse. It invited honesty. Serafina touched the old bone whistle at her throat. Rurik's eyes followed the motion. Where did you get that? He asked. A boy gave it to me when I was little. Before the palace. I got lost during a winter market storm. He found me under a pine, wrapped me in a blue scarf, and scolded me for freezing quietly. Rurik went still. Serafina looked at him. What? He reached toward the whistle, stopped, and lowered his hand. It was not blue. Her breath caught. What? The scarf was gray when my mother made it. I had fallen through creek ice the week before and stained it with the dye from a merchant's glove. It looked blue after that. The kennel sounds faded. Serafina's fingers closed around the whistle. You! Rurik's face had lost its hard command. Under it stood a boy with serious eyes in a snowstorm. I was 14, he said. You were very small, very angry, and determined not to cry where anyone could see. I was 8. You told me brave girls did not make noise. And you said brave girls were allowed to ask before becoming decorative ice. I was not diplomatic. A laugh escaped her, soft and stunned. You were rude. You were freezing. I kept the whistle. His gaze moved over her face in a way that felt almost painful. I looked for you the next morning. The market had cleared. No one knew where the little girl with the hound pup had gone. My mother found me first. She nearly killed 3 guards in one weather vane. Then she took service at the palace 2 years later. I remembered you, he said. The words were plain. They did not feel plain. Serafina leaned back against the rail because her knees had become unreliable. You remembered a lost child? I remembered a girl who corrected my knot while shivering. I tied the scarf badly. You were offended. It was a terrible knot. I improved. His voice had dropped. Serafina looked at the man before her, the general with scarred hands, the alpha who stood at thresholds, the boy who had given her a whistle without asking for anything back. Something in her chest shifted from interest into recognition. Not fate. She did not trust words that removed choice. Recognition was different. Recognition said, there you are, and I decide what that means. You saved me once, she said. Your mother saved you. I found you first. Do not argue with a woman holding 32 witnesses. He stepped closer. I am not arguing. You look like you are. I am trying not to touch you. The confession struck clean. Serafina's fingers tightened on the rail. Why? Because you learned today that I was part of an old memory that can make a person feel cornered by gratitude. You think too much. Often. Stop for a minute. His eyes darkened. She took his hand and set it at her waist. Rurik went completely still. The touch was over coat and corset and wool, but his fingers spread as if he had been made to hold that exact line of her body and punished for discovering it late. Serafina stepped closer until the toes of her boots touched his. Her free hand rested against his chest. I am not grateful right now, she said. I am tired, angry, and choosing badly on purpose. His thumb moved once at her waist. This is not bad. It may be unwise. Most things worth guarding are. She lifted her face. He bent slowly. This kiss was accurate. It began carefully, because both of them were too aware of what had broken behind her. Then his hand tightened at her waist, and hers slid up to the back of his neck, and careful became something warmer. He tasted of winter herb drink, and restraint finally given a task. Serafina rose higher on her toes. Rurik's other arm came around her back, steady and firm, pulling her closer without taking the choice from her feet. A pup sneezed. Neither of them stopped. Another pup barked. Rurik made a low sound against her mouth that had nothing to do with command. Serafina smiled into the kiss before she could help it. Grandmother Pike barked once. They separated at once. The old bitch stared from her cushion with ancient disapproval. Serafina pressed both hands to Rurik's chest and breathed. That was not 2 breaths later. That was adequate timing. Rurik rested his forehead near hers. I dislike that hound less now. Her approval is difficult to win. I noticed. The hound settled again. Serafina should have been frightened by how quickly her body had trusted his. She was frightened. She was also alive in a way grief had tried to smother. Rurik touched the whistle cord lightly. Keep this visible at the hunt. Why? Old border law honors a rescue token. It proves I knew you before court could buy or name you. If Oren claims you manipulated me for protection, I will show that I owed you none and gave it anyway. You did not owe me protection. No, and you are not giving it anyway. His eyes searched hers. She tapped his chest. You are giving me soldiers, clerks, evidence chests, and a very severe quartermaster. I will protect myself in public. You may stand close enough to make stupid people reconsider their hobbies. Rurik's slow smile returned. That I can do. Good. Serafina. Yes. After the hunt, when the evidence is read and your name is yours again, I will ask if the line has moved farther. Heat climbed her neck. That is arrogant. It is strategic patience. You make patience sound indecent. Only near you. Grandmother Pike barked again. Serafina pointed at the old hound. Do not judge me. You had 6 mates and bit 3. Rurik choked on a laugh. The hunt began under a sky the color of polished steel. The royal forest lay 2 hours from the capital, where old pines crowded a ceremonial road lined with antler poles and blue banners. Noble houses arrived in fur and jewels. Priests from the Moon Chapel carried silver bowls. Merchants brought decorated grain baskets for public blessing. Border soldiers entered last, without decoration, pulling sealed evidence chests on sleds. Serafina rode at the front of the hounds. She wore no bridal white. She had chosen her dark green training coat, polished boots, and her mother's black horn whistle at her belt. The old bone whistle lay visible at her throat. 32 hounds moved around her in perfect formation. Buttons wore no fur wrap today because Marave had locked it in an evidence chest after discovering he had tried to trade it for sausage. Rurik rode beside Serafina on his black horse. He wore border armor under a plain cloak. No jewel marked him. He did not need one. People moved aside because their bodies understood him before their pride did. Whispers rippled through the gathered houses. There she is. She stole the hounds. He brought the border wolf. Prince Oren stood on the high viewing platform beside King Albrecht, Lady Corvina, and the council. Oren's collar sat high enough to hide several bruises. Corvina wore a pale blue gown and a new white fur wrap. Her smile thinned when she saw Serafina. Serafina smiled back. Captain Biscuit showed his teeth in what might have been joy. The master of ceremonies lifted a staff. By royal command, the winter hunt opens with the prince's first trail. Objection, Serafina said. Her voice carried because she had trained hounds across wind for 10 years. The staff faltered. Oren leaned forward. Mistress Hale has no standing to interrupt royal ceremony. She is under accusation for theft and assault. Serafina rode closer to the platform. Rurik stayed at her shoulder, silent and immense. I have standing under the Hound Master's oath, she said. If the hunt trail is tampered with, the trainer may halt the hunt before the first horn. If royal hounds are used to conceal a crime, the trainer may demand witness track before all packs. A murmur moved through the old nobles. They knew the law. They had forgotten it because kennel people rarely had enough power to use it. King Albrecht frowned. He was a broad man with tired eyes and a crown too heavy for his neck. Serafina, child, this is not the time. She flinched at child, then steadied. Your Majesty, Prince Oren and Lady Corvina planned to send me down the western ravine during this hunt. Lady Corvina moved trail markers. Prince Oren approved it. I have the markers, the map, the seal knife, and witnesses. Oren laughed. It sounded practiced. Witnesses? Dogs? Yes, Serafina said. They are less corrupt than men. A dangerous amount of the crowd agreed out loud. Corvina stepped forward. This is a hysterical performance. She attacked us with animals because she could not accept that the prince preferred a more suitable bride. The old wound opened. Serafina let the crowd see it for one heartbeat. Then she closed her hand around the reins. A more suitable bride would not need a ravine. Laughter broke from the lower ranks. Corvina's face tightened. Rurik spoke for the first time. The Frost March also enters accusation. The royal grain sent to my garrisons was cut with sand, mold, and false weight. Evidence links the fraud to chapel warehouses controlled by House Marrow and authorized under the prince's winter reserve order. Oren's gaze snapped to him. General Voss, you overstep. I underfed my temper for 3 months, Rurik said. Do not call that overstep. The border soldiers struck spear, but against the snow. King Albrecht lifted a hand. Enough. These are grave claims. They will be heard after the hunt. Serafina's stomach dropped. After the hunt meant time to hide evidence, silence witnesses, and trigger the same trap under ceremony. She raised the blackhorn whistle. "No," she said. The entire field stilled. King Albrecht stared at her. Serafina's voice shook once, then steadied. "The oath says before the first horn, not after. The hounds are not decorations, Your Majesty. The hunt is not a toy for princes. If the Western Trail remains open while the accusation stands, every rider here enters a tampered course. If the grain blessing proceeds while sand sits in royal sacks, every hungry border child hears the crown bless fraud." The king's face changed. Oren saw it and struck fast. "She is manipulating you with kennel law. Father, she is angry because I ended a childish match. She stole royal animals. She fled the palace in the night." Serafina dismounted. Snow crunched under her boots. "I left in the night," she said, "after you planned to leave me in the snow. I took ledgers, hounds, and proof. That is not flight. That is transportation of evidence." Rurik dismounted behind her. He did not touch her. She felt him there anyway. The master of ceremonies looked helplessly at the king. Before the king could answer, Corvina smiled again. "Then let the hounds track," she said. "If Mistress Hale trusts beasts more than nobles, let beasts decide." Serafina did not like how easily Corvina agreed. Rurik's hand brushed the back of Serafina's glove. One brief contact. Warning, not command. Corvina turned to the crowd. "Let them track the western markers. If her accusation is true, the hounds will find my scent, yes? If not, she should surrender the hounds and accept a healer's rest." A healer's rest meant quiet confinement. Oren looked relieved. Serafina understood the trap. Corvina had replaced the marker scent. She wanted a simple track because she had cleaned the obvious clue. So Serafina changed the game. "Agreed," she said. "The hounds will track 3 things everyone can understand. Your rose oil, the Marrow warehouse seal, and the prince's own grain order. We will begin with your new fur wrap, Lady Corvina." Corvina's smile froze. Buttons, sitting beside Mara Vey's evidence chest, perked up with religious interest. Mara Vey stepped forward and opened the first chest. Inside lay the original white fur wrap, sealed in linen, along with Corvina's scraped wax knife and red markers. The crowd leaned in. "That is my property," Corvina snapped. "Yes," Serafina said. "It has been very useful." Buttons wagged as if thanked personally. The king rubbed a hand over his face. "Proceed." The hound track became the most watched ceremony in winter hunt history. Serafina gave Duchess the fur wrap scent first. Duchess crossed the snow, ignored Corvina's current wrap, and put her nose on the trail map table beside the platform. Then she pawed at the underside. A clerk lifted the tablecloth. 3 spare red markers were taped beneath the wood. The crowd erupted. Oren shouted, "Anyone could have put those there." "Correct," Serafina said. "So we continue." Mutton tracked the Marrow warehouse seal from the false sacks to a chapel guard satchel. The guard tried to run. Mara Vey moved first, swept his ankle with her staff, caught his collar before his face met the snow, and set him on his knees with insulting politeness. The satchel held seal wax, rose oil, and a payment token marked with House Marrow's rose. Corvina's mother fainted with excellent timing. No one helped quickly. Grandmother Pike tracked the same sour warehouse dust to 2 Marrow wagons parked behind the blessing tent. Under the canvas, good wheat filled the top layer of each display basket. Sand and mold filled the lower sacks meant for public shipment after ceremony. The border soldiers began to shout. Rurik raised one hand. They fell silent, but the silence had claws. Serafina looked at Oren. His face had lost its handsome laziness. Without it, he looked smaller. "You signed the transfer," she said. "I signed what my officers prepared. And the note about me?" She turned to Mara Vey. Mara Vey opened the second chest and handed the steward's order to the king's clerk. The clerk read the line aloud. "Keep the kennel woman away from the hearing. Leave the western trail open. Ovi." The field went so quiet Serafina heard harness bells in the far snow. Oren's eyes flicked from the king to the nobles to Rurik. Then they landed on Serafina and filled with a hatred that finally looked honest. "You should have stayed grateful," he said. The words carried. Rurik moved. Serafina caught his wrist before he crossed the space. His whole body stopped under her hand. The power in that pause shook her more than movement would have. "Mine," she said quietly. "This part is mine." Rurik's eyes burned down into hers. Then he stepped back. Serafina faced Oren. "I was grateful," she said. "For work. For a place in the kennels. For my mother's oath being honored. You mistook gratitude for ownership because no one taught you to see women who arrive with useful hands." Oren's mouth twisted. "You think a few dogs and a border brute make you powerful?" Captain Biscuit growled. Rurik did not. That was more frightening. Corvina seized the moment. She lifted a silver whistle from her sleeve and blew 3 sharp notes. The sound cut through the field. Several strange wolves burst from the tree line. They were not palace hounds. They were paid winter riders in white hunting wraps, hidden low among the trees. They ran for the evidence chests, not the crowd. Serafina understood the trick at once. Ruin the proof, blame panic, and call the hearing unsafe. Serafina blew the black horn whistle. Her hounds surged. No wounds. No frenzy. She had trained them for crowd control, not harm. Captain Biscuit hit the first attacker in the chest and drove him into a snowbank. Duchess caught a white cloth sleeve and spun another rider sideways. Mutton seized a satchel strap and dragged its owner in a circle until the man begged for stillness. Border soldiers closed around the evidence chests. Oren grabbed Serafina from behind. His arm locked across her shoulders. The silver edge of a ceremonial hunt knife flashed near her collar, too close for comfort. The crowd recoiled. Rurik froze 10 steps away. Serafina felt Oren shaking. "Call them off," he hissed. "Call them off, or I will make this ugly." Fear flashed through her body, bright and old. Snow. Ravine. Only. Then Captain Biscuit saw the blade and lunged. "Stay," Serafina shouted. The hound stopped mid-charge, claws tearing lines through snow. The command rippled outward. Every hound froze. Every border wolf turned. Oren laughed against her ear. "There. That is what you are. A trainer. A servant with tricks." Something opened under Serafina's skin. It was not gentle. It was not a pretty glow from a tail. It felt like winter cracking a locked river. Her mother's black whistle burned at her belt. The bone whistle at her throat turned cold enough to bite. Every wolf sound in the clearing struck her blood as language. She heard panic, hunger, shame, rage, obedience forced through bad orders. She heard Rurik's wolf as a low thunder held behind iron, furious because she had told him not to move. Serafina drew one breath. The old oath rose in her memory. Her mother had made her repeat it every winter before the first hunt. The hounds do not belong to the crown. The crown belongs to the one who keeps the pack alive. Oren's grip tightened. Serafina spoke, and her voice carried over the entire field without strain. "Kneel." Every wolf in the clearing went to one knee. Not the humans, not the hounds, the wolves. The hired shifters collapsed first. Then the palace wolf guards. Then 3 noble alphas who had been standing near the platform, faces white with shock. At last, Rurik's knee struck the snow. His eyes stayed on Serafina. The sight nearly broke her concentration. Rurik Voss, border general, cold-blooded alpha, kneeling because her blood had commanded every wolf in reach. Oren did not kneel. He had no true wolf in him, only borrowed authority and a title. Serafina understood before anyone spoke. A sound moved through the crowd. Old Winter Line. Old Kennel Oath. Winter Steward. King Albrecht stood. His face had gone ashen. Oren's grip loosened. Serafina drove her heel into his instep. He yelped. She caught his wrist, turned under his arm the way she taught handlers to escape a tangled lead, and slammed his hand against his own chest. The ceremonial blade fell into the snow. Captain Biscuit sprang, caught Oren's coat sleeve, and dragged him face first into a drift. The field exploded into noise. Serafina did not look away from the kneeling wolves. Her body shook with the force moving through it. She could command them to stay down. She could command them to crawl. The power invited cruelty with a sweet, cold voice. Then she saw Tobin, the young guard with kernels in his pocket, kneeling among the border wolves. His face was frightened, not of her exactly, but of what power might do when it finally changed hands. Serafina released the command. "Stand," she said, "by your own will." The wolves rose slowly. Rurik stood last. Snow clung to one knee of his black trousers. His face held no humiliation, only awe, anger, and something that looked dangerously like devotion. Serafina pointed to the evidence chests. "Read the grain oath. All of it." The king's clerk hesitated. Rurik turned his head. "Read." The clerk read. The old winter grain oath was plain enough for every rider, cook, and kennel girl to understand. The crown had one winter duty before all ceremony: feed the border honestly. Any heir who stole grain, falsified hunt trails, or threatened the hound master's witnesses lost winter authority before the assembly. At the final clause, the clerk's voice broke. If the crown fails the pack, the winter steward may take charge until the packs choose succession openly. Everyone looked at Serafina. She looked at King Albrecht. The king gripped the rail of the platform. Age had turned him slow, but not stupid. His eyes moved from the fraudulent sacks to the kneeling wolves, to Oren spitting snow while Captain Biscuit sat on his back, to Corvina trying to edge behind her mother. "Your mother," he said to Serafina, voice rough. "Leora Hale." She was not only kennel master. Serafina's throat tightened. "No," the king said. "She was my cousin's child, born of the old winter line. She refused court. I gave her service because she demanded work instead of empty honors." Serafina heard whispers become a roar. Not a hidden princess in silk. Not a girl raised for a throne. A kennel woman's daughter with an old winter claim, public evidence, and 32 hounds who had better manners than the royal heir. Oren lifted his snow-covered head. "Father, you cannot be serious. She is a servant." King Albrecht looked at him. Something in the old man's face hardened at last. "You are stripped of hunt command," he said. "You are stripped of winter reserve authority. You will be confined pending full council judgment. House Marrow's warehouses are seized for audit and repayment to the Frost March. Lady Corvina Marrow is detained for conspiracy, grain fraud, and attempted evidence destruction." His voice carried harder. "Every high officer who signed, sealed, ordered, or protected the false grain will stand public judgment under the winter grain oath. If the evidence proves deliberate starvation, the sentence is death. There will be no private pardon behind a velvet curtain." The chapel warehouse officers went white. One granary lord dropped his ceremonial cup into the snow. Marave caught it with one boot before the wine could splash the evidence chest. "Littering during treason," she said. "Bold." Several terrified clerks laughed before remembering they were terrified. Corvina screamed then. It was not elegant. Buttons barked at her once, offended by the pitch. The king turned back to Serafina. "The old law requires a steward. Will you claim it?" The field seemed to tilt. Rurik stood 10 steps away, hands loose at his sides. He did not nod. He did not prompt. He only watched her with a face that said he would hold the line whatever she chose. Serafina thought of the palace kennel at dawn. She thought of her mother oiling leather straps by lamplight. She thought of hungry soldiers, false sacks, a boy saving 3 colonels, Oren's hand at her collar, and wolves kneeling because power had finally answered the wrong person in the field. She also thought of the danger. Power did not become clean because it changed hands. Someone had to scrub it daily. Serafina lifted her chin. "I will claim stewardship," she said. "Not as decoration, not as bride, not as grateful servant. I claim it under the grain oath until the packs can choose openly. First order, Frost March receives full grain from seized marrow stores before sunset. Second, all reserve ledgers become public record. Third, Prince Oren's confinement includes basic food, clean blankets, and no ravines. We are not becoming him." The crowd stared. Then Marave struck her ledger against a shield. One border soldier followed. Then another. The sound spread across the field, shield, staff, boot, spear, hand. It became approval not polished enough for court, but strong enough to shake snow from the banners. Rurik bowed his head. Not a court bow. A border oath. Serafina's eyes stung. Captain Biscuit dragged Oren 3 more inches for emphasis. "Enough," Serafina said. The hound released him immediately. "Thank you," Oren gasped. Captain Biscuit sneezed into his hair. The first act of Serafina's rule was not dramatic. She signed grain release orders with hands that would not stop trembling. Marave stood on her left correcting totals. Rurik stood on her right, making anyone who approached with nonsense reconsider. Border soldiers loaded seized marrow grain into inspected wagons. Hounds checked every sack before it moved. Court nobles tried to speak to Serafina in the new tone people used for power they had recently mocked. She disliked it intensely. One lord bowed so low his hat feather brushed Mutton's nose. Mutton ate the feather. Serafina signed another order. Put that on the evidence list. Rurik leaned closer. Feather theft? Feather redistribution. A promising policy. She looked up at him. The day had left lines of strain around his eyes. Snow had melted in his hair. One knee of his trousers remained wet from kneeling under her command. Guilt pricked. About the field. I did not mean to force you down. I know. I hated seeing it. I know. Stop saying that as if it fixes things. Rurik took the signed order from her and passed it to Marave. Then he turned Serafina gently by the elbow, guiding her behind a banner pole where the crowd could not read her mouth. His touch was light. It steadied anyway. Listen to me, he said. You stopped hired wolves without bloodshed. You released the command when fear would have made many keep it. You gave Orin blankets in the same breath you took his power. Do not spend your first hour as steward apologizing because corrupt men forced an old oath awake with a threat. Her breath shook. You knelt. My wolf recognized winter authority. My pride survived. You are sure? His mouth tilted. I have knelt for worse reasons. Boot repairs. Fallen maps. A hound sitting on my foot. Captain Biscuit is very heavy. Marave stepped around the banner pole with 3 fresh warrants under one arm and the expression of a woman who had just found religion in properly numbered arrests. High Steward, she said, then paused. Am I allowed to call you that before the ink dries? Only if you promise not to faint, Serafina said. I have never fainted in my life. I once broke a smuggler's jaw with a sack of barley. Rurik looked mildly impressed. That is not in your service record. Because I wrote the record. I am merciful to boring historians. Serafina laughed, and the laugh steadied something inside her. Captain Vey, until the full assembly votes, you are acting warden of the grain line. Independent authority. Public ledgers. Armed escort. No noble private access to sealed grain. Marave's face changed once. Not much. Enough. The young officer swallowed, then struck her fist to her heart. Then I will make hunger afraid of paperwork, she said. Good, Serafina replied. Make it terrified. A heavy tyrant. She laughed, then pressed a hand over her eyes. Rurik took that hand and pulled it down. Not roughly, not softly enough to be dismissed. His fingers wrapped around hers. Look at me. She did. I am not less because your power answered, he said. If anything, I am relieved. I have carried too much alone because the crown preferred hungry wolves to inconvenient reports. If you mean to scrub power daily, I will hand you brushes. That struck deeper than any pretty vow could have. That may be the least romantic sentence ever spoken. I can do better later. Later? His thumb moved over her knuckles. When you are not signing food orders and trying not to faint from bloodline politics. I am not trying to faint. Good. Because if you fall, I will catch you, and every hound will howl again. As if summoned by prophecy, Captain Biscuit howled from across the field. Serafina lowered her head to their joined hands. I am going to outlaw timing. Ambitious first decree. Do not mock your steward. I would not dare. He absolutely would. By nightfall, Frostgate wagons rolled north loaded with clean grain. Marrow warehouses sat under seal. Orin and Corvino were transported separately under guard, both furious, both alive, both facing public judgment. King Albrecht issued a proclamation naming Serafina Winter Steward until the full pack assembly convened in 30 days. The title felt too large. The work did not. Work began immediately. Serafina returned not to the palace bridal wing, but to the old council residence beside the Hound Yards. She refused the queen's apartments. She also refused 3 ladies who arrived to dress her in silver before breakfast. I am auditing grain stores, she told them. If any sleeve prevents me from opening sacks, the sleeve is treason. They retreated. Rurik arrived 10 minutes later with a stack of petitions, 2 clerks, and Captain Biscuit trotting proudly at his side. Serafina stared. Why is my hound with you? He followed me. He does not follow. He supervises. Then I am supervised. Captain Biscuit dropped a glove at Serafina's feet. She looked at Rurik's bare right hand. Did he steal that from you? 3 corridors ago. I chose not to negotiate with a superior force. Wise. Rurik set the petitions on her table. The first council sitting begins in 1 hour. Before that, Marave needs signatures for the second grain release. The palace steward wants to know whether you will preserve Oren's household staff. 3 noble houses request private audience. For request public distance from House Marrow. The chapel claims innocence with impressive volume. Also, your hounds have occupied the East Fountain. Serafina sat down slowly. Why? It contains fish. There are no fish in the East Fountain. There were 2. She covered her face. I have been steward for less than a day. Rurik came around the table and crouched in front of her chair. The position made her look down at him. After the field, that should have been strange. Instead, it felt like a private correction to public power. He placed both hands on the arms of her chair and held her gaze. 1 order at a time, he said. I know. 1 liar at a time. I know. 1 hound-related disaster at a time. Her mouth trembled. That may be impossible. Then 2 disasters. Maximum. She laughed. Rurik's eyes softened. He reached up and touched her cheek with the backs of his fingers. There you are. The words went straight through her. His thumb paused at the corner of her mouth. It was barely a touch, indecent only because both of them stopped breathing over it. General, she said, and her voice came out lower than planned. Steward, he answered. You are too close for administrative efficiency. I noticed. Move back. His eyes dropped to her mouth. Is that an order? She should have said yes. Instead, her fingers closed around the front of his coat and held him exactly where he was. Captain Biscuit, apparently recognizing a government crisis, sat down beside the chair and began to pant with open delight. Serafina leaned forward before fear could count reasons. She kissed him in the middle of petitions, stolen gloves, and fish crimes. Rurik rose into it, 1 hand sliding to the back of her chair, the other settling at her waist with a restraint that was somehow worse than greed. The chair creaked. Serafina made the mistake of opening her mouth against his, and Rurik answered with a sound so low that her knees forgot they were seated. Captain Biscuit made an approving grunt. Serafina broke the kiss first, breathless. Door. Closed. Clerks. Outside. Hound. Judging. Good. Accuracy matters. Rurik's hand flexed once at her waist. If I keep kissing you, the clerks will invent a new category of delay. Let them. You are High Steward. Then I can authorize delays. He laughed under his breath and rested his forehead against hers. For 1 dangerous second, he looked less like the cold border general and more like a man losing a battle he wanted to lose. For 1 full second, neither of them moved. Serafina closed her eyes. I'm going to promote the first person who invents silent paperwork. Rurik's smile appeared against her mouth. Always. Someone outside cleared a throat, aggressively official. The smile vanished from both of them. Marave's voice came through the wood. If you 2 are done establishing diplomatic contact, the grain orders need ink. Serafina turned scarlet. Rurik looked at the door. Quartermaster. General. You heard nothing. I heard governance. It sounded inefficient. Captain Biscuit barked once. Marave added, the dog agrees. Serafina dropped her forehead to Rurik's shoulder and laughed until the pressure in her chest eased. 30 days later, the full pack assembly met beneath the repaired antler poles of the winter hunt field. This time, no trail markers had been moved. Serafina checked them herself at dawn with Duchess and 3 board clerks. Every grain basket had been cut open, tested, weighed, sealed, and marked by public hand. The chapel warehouse officers stood under guard. House Marrow's accounts had been read until even the nobles understood the theft. Good grain had reached Frostgate, Northmere, Greyford, and the 3 villages that supplied sled dogs to the border. No one called hunger dramatic anymore. Oren stood before the assembly without his prince's cloak. He had eaten plain food, slept on clean blankets, and complained through most of it. The public judgment stripped his succession rights, seized his private hunting estates for restitution, and sentenced him under the winter grain oath for falsifying a hunt, endangering a witness, and protecting deliberate starvation. No noble name softened the sentence. It would be carried out away from the field, without spectacle, after the victims' accounts entered the public record. Corvina Marrow, her mother, the royal steward, the chapel bursar, 2 granary lords, and every high officer who signed the false route books received the same judgment. Lower clerks who had confessed early kept their lives and gave testimony. Drivers who had moved sealed wagons under threat were assigned supervised restitution. High officials who had traded border hunger for court comfort met the full sentence of the oath. The seized Marrow silver funded border reserves, kennel repairs, and a public grain office staffed by people who had eaten army porridge and were therefore immune to elegant excuses. Serafina watched the orders signed and felt no triumphal music rise inside her. Relief was quieter. It wore ink on its fingers. When the votes were called, the PAC representatives chose her as High Steward for a full winter term, with authority to reform grain, hunt, and hound law before a permanent Crown Assembly. The old winter line made her eligible. The evidence made her credible. Her choices in the field made people trust the claim. Serafina's first permanent appointment came before any courtier could ask for a private favor. "Marave," she said. The grain watch captain stepped forward in her brown coat, steel staff at her back, and ledger hugged to her ribs. For once, she looked young. "You helped expose the theft when silence would have been safer," Serafina said. "You protected witnesses, held the grain line, and told the truth without waiting for permission. By my authority as High Steward, I name you High Warden of the Grain Line. Your office answers to the public ledger, not to noble kitchens." Marave stared at her. Captain Biscuit barked once. "He seconded the appointment," Serafina said. Marave struck her fist to her heart. "Then I accept before the dog changes policy." The field laughed. The laugh mattered. It meant the new law had a face, a staff, and a woman who would hit corruption with both hands. That distinction mattered to her. After the vote, King Albrecht removed the winter circlet from its velvet cushion. It was not a queen's crown. It was black iron set with one pale stone, made for work and weather. He held it out to her with both hands. "Leora's daughter," he said. "The crown should have known you before crisis forced it." Serafina took the circlet. "Yes, it should have." A few courtiers inhaled at the bluntness. The king bowed his head. "Then let that be recorded too." She placed the circlet on her own head. The field bowed. Hounds did not bow, because hounds were sensible. Captain Biscuit sat on Rurik's boot instead, which many observers understood as a border endorsement. Rurik stood beside the steward's platform, not behind it. Serafina had insisted. He had argued for 7 minutes that a general belonged at her flank in public crisis. She had argued for 7 minutes and one eyebrow that a woman who had been almost erased by a fiancé did not need another man arranged as her shadow. They had compromised. He stood at the edge of the platform, close enough to intercept threats, visible enough to annoy traditionalists, and far enough that no one could pretend he held her strings. After the assembly, when the crowd moved toward the feast tents, Serafina found him in the old pine lane. Snow balanced on the branches. Evening light turned the path blue. For once, no clerk followed her. No noble waited with a complaint. No hound appeared except Grandmother Pike, who settled at the end of the lane and pretended not to guard them. Rurik looked at the circlet on Serafina's head. "It suits you. It pinches. Most authority does. I am considering replacing it with a warm hat. A radical reform." She stepped closer. Would the Frost March support it? With enthusiasm. He reached up and adjusted the circlet with careful fingers. His knuckles brushed her hair. Serafina closed her eyes for 1 second, letting the touch land. When she opened them, his hand had lowered to her shoulder, but had not left. "You have not asked," she said. "I said I would ask after the hunt, then after the evidence, then after the assembly. You kept acquiring emergencies. I may continue acquiring them. I noticed. So ask before someone steals a fish." Rurik's hand slid from her shoulder to her waist, slow enough to give her every chance to refuse. She did not. The winter lane shrank around that touch. "Has the line moved?" he asked. Serafina looked at the man who had found a lost child without trying to own the memory. The man who had knelt under her power and risen without resentment. The man who brought petitions, blankets, military patience, and the worst romantic sentences in the kingdom. The man whose hand at her waist made her feel steadier and less tame at the same time. "Yes," she said. His eyes darkened. How far? She set both hands on his chest and pushed him back against the pine trunk. Surprise flashed across his face. It was brief. Pleasure followed. His hands settled on her hips, firm and warm through her coat. That far, she said. Rurik looked down at her mouth. A useful measurement. Do you need confirmation? His hands had not moved higher than her waist. That almost made it worse. Rurik held her as if he had memorized the exact line between protection and hunger and intended to suffer there with military discipline. Serafina, who had survived betrayal, grain fraud, and 32 hounds with opinions, found his restraint personally insulting. You are thinking too loudly, she said. I am trying to be honorable. Try being interesting. Rurik's laugh was quiet and rough enough to warm her ears. In all investigations, she kissed him. This time, no grief stood between them. No one had just read an ugly order. No threat waited at her collar. The kiss was not careful in the same way. It was still controlled, because Rurik's control seemed built into his bones, but heat moved through it. His arm wrapped around her waist and drew her close. Her fingers slid into the black hair at his nape. He made that low sound again, the one that turned her knees into poor advisors. Grandmother Pike waited until Rurik's hand had fully tightened at Serafina's waist, until Serafina had made one helpless sound into his mouth, and then barked once from the lane. Serafina did not stop. Rurik smiled against her mouth. Your chaperone objects. She objects to weak follow-through. Then I must respect command. He kissed her again, and for several excellent breaths, governance waited. When they returned to the feast, Marave gave them both a look that could curdle milk. The new High Steward has pine needles in her hair, she said. Serafina removed one. Administrative burden. Rurik removed another from his own collar. Forestry consultation. Captain Biscuit stole a roll from the table and dropped it at Serafina's feet. And what is that? Marave asked. Serafina picked up the roll. A tribute from the food office. That dog is going to have a title by spring. He already has one. Rurik looked resigned. Minister of Stolen Bread? Deputy Minister, Serafina said. Grandmother Pike outranks him. The feast laughed around them. Not court laughter, better laughter. Soldiers, kennel girls, clerks, village delegates, and nobles who had learned quickly all shared tables under frost lanterns. The grain bread was coarse and honest. The stew held real meat. Hounds slept under benches with full bellies. At midnight, Serafina slipped from the tent and walked to the kennels prepared for the royal pack. The hounds rose one by one. Captain Biscuit came first, then Duchess. Grandmother Pike remained lying down but opened one eye. Serafina crouched in the straw. Good evening, honorable criminals, she whispered. We survive politics. Tomorrow we improve it. Buttons licked her chin. Behind her, the kennel door opened. Rurik entered with 2 bowls of stew and a blanket over one arm. You missed the council toast, he said. Was it good? Terrible. I improved it by leaving. He sat beside her in the straw without complaint. Captain Biscuit immediately put his head in Rurik's lap. Rurik looked down at him. This is an abuse of office. You are learning government. Serafina took 1 bowl. Rurik spread the blanket over her knees, then over his, making no attempt to hide that he wanted the shared warmth. She let him. More than that, she leaned into his side. For a while, they ate in the kennels while the new government danced without them. You will be busy, Rurik said. You will be unbearable. Likely. You will tell me when my counsel is lying. Yes. You will not decide for me. No. You will stand close enough to make stupid people reconsider their hobbies. With pleasure. She looked up, and when I am tired, his arm came around her shoulders. He pulled her into his warmth, not as a rescue, not as a claim, but as a place she had chosen and could choose again. Then I will bring stew, he said, and blankets, and petitions in the morning, after you sleep. Still not romantic. He bent and kissed the corner of her mouth. I love you, Serafina Hale. I am trying not to make that sound like a supply order. Her heart stopped, then restarted with a force that made her laugh softly. You failed, she said, but I love you too. Rurik kissed her properly then in the straw, under the supervision of 32 hounds and 1 ancient judge on a cushion. The kiss tasted of stew, winter, and the strange mercy of being wanted after being underestimated. It did not erase what had happened. Better than that, it met her on the far side of it. Outside, the first clean grain wagons rolled north under guard. At the head of the line rode High Warden Marave, steel staff across her saddle and public ledger sealed at her hip. The road would not belong to hungry excuses again. Behind the assembly hall, bells marked the completed sentences of the condemned high officers. The sound was brief, formal, and cold. No one cheered. Serafina had not asked for spectacle. Justice did not need theater to be final. Inside, the High Steward of Winter rested her head against the Border General's shoulder, while Captain Biscuit snored across both their boots. By morning, there would be reforms, angry nobles, hungry villages, and a fountain that still had to be investigated for missing fish. Serafina would rise before dawn, greet every hound by name, and put her hands on the work of ruling. This time, she would not be only anything. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more wolf romance, winter revenge, and stubborn women with dangerous hounds.
Welcome to Moonlit Romance Library. Please follow for more stories. Welcome to Moonlit Romance Library. Please follow for more stories. Part 1. Ashes and Silence. Part 1. Ashes and Silence. Serafina Ashgrove returned from the Sanctum Healing Ward with a death sentence in her pocket and found her husband's old Alliance bride hanging above the hearth in his private chamber. Before she could tell Obsidian Drake that Ashheart Corrosion had given her 4 months to live, he would defend a portrait more fiercely than he had defended his wife in 6 years. If the universe intended to kill her, it had chosen a remarkably petty Tuesday to begin. Ashheart Corrosion, the healer had said that morning. Turning the crystal diagnostic sphere in his weathered hands. Inside it, Serafina's blood sample pulsed with threads of dark silver. Beautiful, actually, if you didn't know what it meant. The decay has already entered your bloodstream and begun affecting your optic channels. I estimate 4 months, perhaps 5 if you avoid all magical exertion. Serafina sat very still on the examination bench. The leather was cold beneath her palms. She counted 3 cracks in the ceiling plaster before she trusted her voice. And if I don't avoid magical exertion? The healer looked at her then. His eyes held the particular pity reserved for those who had already decided their answer. 2 months, maybe less. At the door, a young apprentice healer named Ellen Vale pretended not to listen and failed completely. She was freckled, sharp-chinned, and still young enough to be angry at cruelty before she remembered to be afraid of rank. When Serafina rose, Ellen silently tucked an extra vial of pain tonic into her glove and looked away, as if mercy were a clerical error. She nodded once, precisely the way she did everything. Then she stood, smoothed her heavy wool cloak, charcoal gray, because apparently that was the only color the universe would permit today, and walked out without paying. Not because she couldn't afford it, but because she'd forgotten, which was worse. The cold hit her face like a slap. Good, she needed it. 4 months. She had spent 6 years as the contractual wife of Obsidian Drake, Duke of the Black Dragon Eyrie, Lord of the Dragonbone Mines, Commander of the Sky Cavalry, and Chairman of the Dragon Gold Merchant Consortium. 6 years of being invisible in her own home. 6 years of whispers behind fans. Poor thing, married above her station. He never touches her. Did you see the way she sat alone at the midwinter feast? 6 years of watching her husband look through her as if she were made of glass too thin to bother seeing. The cruelest part was that it had not begun as a prison. In the first winter after their contract, Obsidian had once stepped between her and a courtier's insult with such fierce, awkward tenderness that Serafina had believed he might love her as she loved him. He had looked at her then as if no other woman in the world had ever mattered. That memory was why the betrayal still had teeth. She had spent 6 years, and the universe had decided that was enough. Fine. But she would tell him first. Not because she expected comfort, she had stopped expecting that approximately 4 years ago, but because there were practical matters. The marriage contract had clauses about illness, about inheritance, about the disposition of assets. She was, despite everything, a woman who believed in clean paperwork. The Black Dragon Eyrie sat atop Iron Vein Mountain like a crown of obsidian and dragon bone, its towers carved from the living rock, its halls heated by veins of dragon fire that ran beneath the floors like molten blood. It was beautiful in the way that prisons could be beautiful, all sharp edges and expensive silence. Serafina passed through the lower gates without challenge. The guards barely glanced at her. She had learned, in 6 years, to move through the Eyrie like smoke, present enough to avoid being locked out, absent enough to avoid being noticed. It was a skill that had served her well in her other life, the one nobody here knew about. The one that was killing her. She climbed the central staircase to the Duke's private wing, her boots leaving wet prints on the dragonbone steps. The halls were quiet at this hour. Most of the Eyrie's residents were at the evening meal in the Great Hall, which Serafina had stopped attending 2 years ago after the incident with the soup. The soup had been poisoned, mildly. She had noticed before drinking it. Nobody had believed her. The door to the Duke's bedchamber was ajar. She pushed it open. The room was vast, all dark stone and black silk, heated by a fireplace large enough to roast a horse. Above the fireplace hung a portrait she had never seen before, or rather, a portrait that had been moved from storage to this most prominent position. It showed a woman. Golden hair like sunlight through honey, blue eyes wide and dewy, lips curved in a smile so gentle it looked almost apologetic for existing. She wore white, naturally, because women like that always wore white. Celestine Brightmore. The Duke's former betrothed, the woman his family had once displayed as the perfect future duchess before the alliance dissolved. The one whose painted perfection had haunted their marriage bed more effectively than any actual ghost could have managed. Serafina stared at the portrait. Something cold and sharp pressed behind her sternum. Not grief, not jealousy, just the bone-deep exhaustion of a woman who had walked into yet another room that wasn't really hers. She should not have touched the frame. She knew that. But her vision flickered, just for a moment, the edges going gray, and she reached out to steady herself, and her fingers brushed the gilded edge of the portrait. "Don't." The voice came from behind her, low, cold, resonant, the kind of voice that made lesser nobles stammer and serving girls drop their trays. Obsidian Drake stood in the doorway of his private bath, his dark hair damp, a high-collared black shirt fastened at his throat, his silver-gray eyes fixed on her hand with an expression that might have been anger or might have been contempt. With him, they often looked the same. He was beautiful. She had never denied that. Tall and broad-shouldered, with the sharp bone structure of old dragonblood aristocracy and the particular grace of a man who could shift into something enormous and winged. His jaw was cut glass. His cheekbones could slice paper. Even after 6 years of marriage to him, Serafina occasionally caught herself thinking what a waste before her rational mind caught up. "I wasn't," she began. "Touching her portrait with your grubby little fingers?" He crossed the room in 3 long strides, took her wrist, and moved her hand away from the frame. His grip was not gentle. "I had it restored. The oils on skin can damage the pigment." Serafina looked at her hand. It was perfectly clean. She had scrubbed it raw in the sanctum washroom after the diagnosis, a compulsive habit she'd developed to hide the faint gray discoloration that ashheart corrosion left on the fingertips. "I came to talk to you," she said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. "About what?" He released her wrist and turned away, adjusting his cuffs with the precise irritation of a man interrupted during his evening routine. "If this is about the household budget again..." "I'm ill." He paused, for exactly 1 second. Then he continued adjusting his cuffs. "You're always claiming some ailment or another. Last month it was headaches, the month before fatigue. If you want attention, Serafina, there are less tedious ways to get it. The cold thing behind her sternum pressed harder. This isn't. Is this because of the portrait? He turned to face her, and now his expression was clear. Contempt, edged with something almost like satisfaction. You saw Celestine's portrait and decided to manufacture an illness for sympathy? How predictable. Obsidian. It's your grace in this wing. His silver eyes were flat. We discussed this. They had not discussed it. He had decreed it. 3 years ago, after she had made the mistake of calling him by name at a banquet, and he had looked at her as if she had publicly urinated on the tablecloth. Serafina drew a breath. The air tasted faintly metallic, her own blood, she realized. The corrosion was active today. She swallowed it. Your Grace, she said, and the words tasted like copper and ash. I have been diagnosed with ash heart corrosion. The decay has entered my blood and my optic channels. I have approximately 4 months. Silence. Obsidian studied her face the way one studies an insect that has landed on one's sleeve, with mild interest and absolute indifference to its survival. Ash heart corrosion, he repeated. A disease of runesmiths and sealcasters, which you are not. She said nothing. Unless you've been secretly practicing forbidden magic behind my back. Have you? His voice sharpened. Have you been dabbling in things beyond your station again? Beyond her station. She was the last living heir of the Ashgrove rune line, a bloodline so ancient it predated the Dragon Aeries themselves. She could trace, cast, and break dragon rune contracts that would make his court smiths weep with inadequacy. She had single-handedly saved his empire 6 years ago. But he didn't know that. And she was not going to tell him today. Never mind, she said quietly. I apologize for disturbing your evening. She turned to leave, made it 3 steps before. Serafina. She stopped, did not turn. If you're going to be ill, he said, his tone as casual as discussing weather, do it in the East Wing. I have guests arriving tomorrow, and I don't need you looking pathetic in the main halls. She left without another word. The guests arrived not the next day, but that very night, a dramatic entrance through the Aeries sky gates that woke half the household. Serafina, lying awake in her cold corner chamber in the East Wing, heard the commotion through the walls. Running feet, excited whispers, the heavy beat of wings in the landing courtyard. By morning, the entire Aerie was buzzing. Celestine Brightmoor had returned. Not alone. She came with a child, a small boy of perhaps 4 years, with silver blonde hair and wide blue eyes, and this was the detail that had set every tongue in the Aerie wagging, the ability to produce a flicker of blue dragon flame from his tiny palms. Serafina heard about it from her maid, Marta, the only servant still assigned to her wing, a sturdy woman of 50 who disapproved of everything equally, and therefore couldn't be called biased. Claims the boy is his Grace's blood, Marta said, setting down a tray of toast and weak tea with rather more force than necessary. Born after she left, she says. Raised in secret to protect him from enemies, she says. She sniffed. If you ask me, which nobody does, a woman who hides a child for 4 years has more to hide than a child. Serafina did not eat the toast. Her appetite had been failing for weeks, another symptom she had been carefully hiding. She drank the tea, which tasted like nothing. Where is the boy now? Main nursery. Already been given the blue silk suite, a personal nurse, and 3 new outfits from the Duke's own tailor. Marta's mouth was a thin line. You, meanwhile, have 1 maid and a leaking ceiling. The ceiling isn't leaking. It will be. I've seen the stain. Give it 2 weeks. Serafina dressed carefully. Heavy charcoal wool, high collar, long sleeves. She pinned her dark hair back with the simple iron clasp she wore daily, avoiding the ornate dragon crest jewelry that had come with the marriage contract and sat untouched in its velvet case. She checked her reflection, pale but composed. The gray discoloration hadn't reached her face yet. Good. She would need to see the boy, not because she was jealous, she was dying, jealousy required a future, but because something about the claim did not add up. Black dragons produced black dragon fire. The obsidian bloodline had never, in 800 years of recorded history, produced blue flame. But she would need to be careful. The Ares residents already saw her as the unwanted wife. If she questioned the child's parentage openly, she would look like exactly what they expected, the bitter woman trying to eliminate a rival's offspring. She left her chamber and walked toward the main wing. The corridors were busier than usual, servants scurrying with fresh linens, courtiers clustering in doorways to whisper. They fell silent as she passed, then resumed at twice the volume behind her. She found the scene in the winter garden. Celestine Brightmore sat on the carved stone bench beneath the frost roses, wearing a gown of white that somehow wasn't wrinkled despite her night of travel. Her golden hair fell in perfect waves. Her skin was porcelain. Her expression was one of fragile bravery, the look of a woman being very strong about something very difficult. The boy sat at her feet, playing with a set of dragon bone figurines. He was beautiful, Serafina admitted. Silver blonde hair, enormous blue eyes, chubby cheeks flushed pink. He made small sounds as he played, and occasionally a tiny lick of blue flame curled from his fingers. Obsidian stood beside Celestine. Not sitting, he never sat in public with anyone, but close enough that his shadow fell across her. His hand rested on the bench back behind her shoulder. Not touching her, but close. He was looking at the boy with an expression Serafina had never seen on his face before. Something soft, something wondering, something that might, in a less frozen man, have been called hope. He had never looked at Serafina like that. Not once. She stopped in the garden archway, took it in, filed it away in the small, cold compartment in her chest where she kept things that hurt too much to examine. Celestine noticed her first. Those blue eyes widened with perfectly calibrated surprise. "Oh, you must be." She looked at Obsidian with a flutter of concern. "I didn't know we would be interrupting." "You're not interrupting anything," Obsidian said flatly, without turning to look at Serafina. "Serafina, this is Celestine Brightmore and her son Lucian. He may be my heir." Maybe. At least he had that much caution still. "How wonderful," Serafina said. Her voice was perfectly level. "Welcome to the Eyrie, Miss Brightmore." Celestine smiled, tremulous, grateful, as if Serafina's welcome meant the world. "Please, call me Celestine. I do so hope we can be friends." She reached out a delicate hand. "I know this must be difficult for you." Serafina looked at the outstretched hand, then at Celestine's face. The smile was flawless. The eyes were calculating. She shook the hand, brief, professional. "Not difficult at all," she said. "I hope you find the Eyrie comfortable." She turned to leave, and her vision flickered. Just a moment. Just the edges going gray, the world tilting sideways. She caught herself on the archway, knuckles white against the stone. "Are you quite well?" Celestine's voice, sweet with concern that carried perfectly across the garden. Obsidian did not turn around. "Perfectly," Serafina said, and walked away. 3 days passed, each worse than the last. Celestine established herself in the Eyrie with the efficiency of a military campaign disguised as helplessness. She needed a larger room. The boy had nightmares without windows. She needed different food. Her constitution was delicate. She needed Serafina's personal sitting room for the boy's lessons. It had the best morning light. Obsidian granted every request without consulting his wife. The boy, Lucian, was paraded before the court daily. His blue flame was displayed, admired, exclaimed over. "A true dragon child," the nobles murmured. "Look at those eyes, just like his Grace's mother's side." Nobody seemed to remember that Obsidian's mother had been a black dragon whose eyes were silver, not blue. Serafina watched. She said nothing. She noticed things. She noticed that Lucian's blue flame flickered oddly, not the steady burn of natural dragon fire, but the stuttering pulse of a flame sustained by external fuel. She noticed that Celestine's delicate wrists bore faint powder marks where something had been regularly applied and wiped away. She noticed that the boy flinched when Celestine touched his shoulder in a certain way. She noticed, but she could not yet prove. On the fourth day, Celestine made her first real move. It happened in the Great Hall at the noon meal. Serafina had come to retrieve a book she'd left on her usual side table. She no longer ate in the hall, but she occasionally sat there to read during off hours when nobody would bother her. The hall was crowded today, some minor celebration for the boys' official presentation to the court. Serafina was crossing the hall toward the side table when Celestine appeared from behind a pillar, carrying a tray of sweets. Their paths intersected. Celestine stumbled, a graceful, floating stumble, the kind that looked effortless, and went down. The tray scattered. Celestine hit the floor with a cry that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Every head turned. "She pushed me," Celestine gasped, one hand clutching her ankle. Tears, actual glistening tears, filled her blue eyes. The Duchess, she cast something at my feet. The hall erupted. Courtiers surged forward. Guards appeared. Obsidian materialized from wherever he'd been lurking, his face thunderous. "Serafina." His voice cut through the noise like a blade. "What did you do?" She looked at him. He was already decided. She could see it in his eyes, the verdict rendered before the trial. Of course he would believe the weeping golden woman over the gray, silent wife who had never given him tears. The old Serafina, the one from 6 years ago, fresh-faced and still hoping, might have stammered a denial, might have begged him to listen, might have dissolved into the pleading, desperate creature he clearly expected her to be. The current Serafina did none of those things. She removed the iron ring from her left index finger, her ash print ring, the only visible tool of her true craft, and pressed it to the stone floor. A pulse of gray light spread outward from the point of contact, thin as spider silk, illuminating the floor like frost on glass. Everywhere it touched, previously invisible marks became visible, footprints of residual spell energy, glowing faintly gold. The courtiers gasped. There, clearly visible on the floor, was a neat line of trip hex energy. It originated not from Serafina's path, but from directly beneath Celestine's own feet. The woman had hexed herself, tripped herself, thrown herself down, and blamed it on the silent wife standing 6 feet away. The glowing marks faded after 3 seconds. Ash print diagnostic traces were not permanent, but 3 seconds was enough. Half the court had seen. Celestine's tears dried remarkably fast. Her expression shifted, just for a heartbeat, from wounded innocence to something sharp and furious before the mask slid back. I don't understand what that was," she whispered. "Some kind of illusion? Obsidian, she's casting things?" "It was a diagnostic reveal," said a voice from the crowd. Old Magister Thornwell, the Ares senior arcanist, pressed forward. His rheumy eyes were sharp. "Shows the origin point of recently cast hexes. Can't be faked." The hex came from under her. He pointed at Celestine, not from the Duchess. Silence. Obsidian looked at the floor where the marks had been, then at Celestine, then at Serafina. He said nothing. He did not apologize. He turned and walked away. Celestine was helped up by her supporters, she still had plenty, and whisked off to her rooms with much fluttering concern. The court dispersed, buzzing. Serafina stood alone in the great hall. Her vision flickered again, longer this time. She pressed her palm against the cool stone of the pillar until the grayness receded. Then she walked to the side table where Lucien's silver water cup had been left among the lunch debris. She turned it over. With a movement so small no one would notice, she pressed her ash print ring to the cup's inner base, leaving a blood trace marker that would activate when the cup was next used. The marker would read the child's blood composition through any liquid he drank from it. In 3 days, it would have enough data to determine exactly whose bloodline Lucien carried. She set the cup back, walked away. Let the blood speak for itself. Part 2. Dead Eggs and Living Things. The snow began that evening, heavy, wet, blanketing the mountain in white that turned the Ares black stone dramatic. Serafina left through the servants' gate at dusk, pulling her hood low. She had an appointment at the Sanctum Healing Ward for a follow-up examination, and she was not going to let anyone see her go. The path down from the eyrie to the city was treacherous in snow, but she knew every step. 6 years of lonely walks had made her an expert on this particular mountain. She moved quickly, her boots finding purchase on the icy stones by memory more than sight. Her right eye had developed a persistent gray haze that no amount of blinking could clear. The appointment was brief and brutal. The corrosion had advanced since Tuesday. The healer adjusted his estimate downward, 3 months, perhaps 3.5. "Is there anything?" Serafina began. "The only known treatment requires a source of white gold dragon fire," the healer said gently, "which, as I'm sure you know, has been extinct for over a century. I'm sorry, Your Grace." She nodded, thanked him, left. The snow had thickened while she was inside. The streets were almost empty, merchants packing up early, lanterns sputtering in the wet wind. Serafina pulled her cloak tighter and turned toward the mountain path. She almost missed it. A pile of refuse beside a merchant's cart. Broken crates, soiled straw, the usual detritus of market day. But something in the pile caught the fading lantern light. A curve. A smooth, oval shape, gray and dull, half buried in dirty snow. An egg. Serafina stopped. It was large, roughly the size of a melon, and completely unremarkable. Gray shell, hairline cracks webbing its surface, no luminescence, no warmth, no sign of the inner fire that marked a living dragon egg. A dead egg. Worthless. That's why the merchant had tossed it with the trash. She should keep walking. She had 3 months to live, a marriage to dissolve, a secret identity to protect, and absolutely no time for. Thump. She felt it through her ash print ring. Not heard, felt. A vibration so faint it was barely distinguishable from her own heartbeat. But there, undeniably there. A heartbeat. Inside the egg. Tiny, struggling, almost gone. "Oh, for..." Serafina pressed her hand to her face. "No, absolutely not." Thump, thump. "I am dying. I don't have time to..." Thump, thump. "This is ridiculous. You're probably going to die anyway. We'll die together in my cold room and they'll find us both frozen in 3 months like some pathetic..." Thump. She picked up the egg. It was heavier than it looked, and cold, so cold that even through her gloves she could feel the chill radiating from its shell. She tucked it inside her cloak, against her chest, where her own body heat might do something. The heartbeat steadied slightly. "I'm not keeping you," she informed the egg.